Empire of Steel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 651 Artillery Support. Yingzhou. This is a city in the south of Yan State. Compared with Bazhou, Yingzhou's city is not big, only 10 miles in length and width. After King Yan led officials to flee here, the small Yingzhou became more and more crowded. Now that Bazhou is occupied by the fourth prince, and only half of the city of Yan is still in our hands, what should we do now? The officials in the temporary palace in the city looked at King Yan eagerly at this time. King Yan's expression was decadent, and he seemed to be very tired while reclining on the chair. The bad news came one after another in the past 2 days. In the end, the Black Feather Army did not stop the aristocratic tribes. Today, Bazhou has been completely occupied by the fourth princes. At the same time, the imperial state and county once occupied by the Yan kingdom were successively conquered by the army of King Qi, and all 6 cities were lost under such betrayal and separation. King Yan gradually lost his calmness, and his mood gradually became irritable. King Yan did not speak, but the underground officials became more and more anxious. An official took the opportunity to say, "His Royal Highness, Xiao Ming has already been enthroned as emperor, and what he wants is nothing more than the Jiangshan of the Great Yu Kingdom. If he were to declare himself a minister to Xiao Ming at this time, he would definitely be delighted, and he might not care about this matter anymore. Yes, Your Highness, King Qi's army is unstoppable, and those who know the times are Genji." Another official said loudly, "That's right, it's too late to be loyal now." After these 2 officials, other officials joined in. King Yan suddenly sneered a few times when he heard the words, and his eyes turned to the officials. These officials naturally hoped that he would be loyal to Xiao Ming because at that time he will be slashed by Xiao Ming, but they are still officials, and Xiao Ming will still use them to manage Yandy. So for him, everyone can surrender, but he alone cannot. No need to say any more, this king has made up his mind. If anyone mentions surrender again, this is the table. King Yan suddenly pulled out his sword and slashed it on the table in front of him. Immediately, the table was stopped by a sharp sword twice, and the officials shrank their necks when they saw this, and did not dare to speak any more. With a snort, King Yan waved his hand to let the officials leave, leaving brothers Kui Cheng and Kui Hao. At this time, King Yan said, "You are all staring at these officials. If anyone wants to eat inside and out like the Yan family and Ji family, just..." Having said that, King Yan made a neck-slashing action. Kui Cheng and Kui Hao looked at each other and nodded. Among them, Kui Cheng said, "Father, the king of Huainan has already sent 100,000 troops to attack Yingzhou, but there are only 70,000 troops in the city. If Yingzhou is lost again, we will no longer be able to hide place." King Yan said ponderingly, "This king may not be Xiao Ming's opponent, but he is definitely not someone who can be manipulated by the king of Huainan. From now on, he will recruit troops in the remaining 5 states, but all men over 13 years old must join the army. Xiao, if Ming wants to kill this king will come with him to break the net." 13 years old. Kui Cheng looked surprised, but it seemed to him that it was too late. The age of conscription in the Great Yu Kingdom was 16 years old. And now they are conscripting from the age of 13 because they have no way out now. After hesitating for a while, the 2 said in unison, "Follow your father's orders." At the same time, the king of Huainan and his eldest son, Kui Shengen, led an army of 100,000 people to arrive in Guangyu yesterday. This Guangyu is located in the southwest of Yingzhou, only 70 miles away from Yingzhou. In the past, it has always been a military center for the king of Huainan to defend against the king of Yan. "Father, my son has sent someone to find out the situation in Yingzhou city. Today, there are only 70,000 troops stationed in Yingzhou city standing on the city wall and letting the north was by." The king of Huainan looked in the direction of Yingzhou city and said, 70,000 people, this King Yan is indeed very powerful, and he still has so many troops after being beaten by the emperor." Kui Shengen felt a little uneasy. King Yan is a 1-character king, while his father is a 2-character king. Not only is his status lower than that of King Yan, but also not as many as King Yan in terms of the number of cities. It's just a matter of who is loyal to the royal family. It can be compared to the father. Hahaha. Daling's words are wrong. This vassal king is something that was set by the great ancestor, and the royal family does not dare to easily change the vassal king's name. But even if it is a one-word king, it is not a matter of one by one. His name was torn apart by his death. King Huainan's eyes were filled with wise light. Father said very much, It is precisely because father has never been ambitious that the emperor believes in father so much, and let his sister enter the palace and become a royal concubine. Qi Shangin said in a deep voice. The king of Huainan sighed. His royal highness is not at ease with any vassal king, otherwise he would not have sent us to attack Yingzhou. This is a test in itself. This time, my father's personal expedition is also to reassure the emperor, and my father does not want to follow the Wei king the footsteps of. Compared with other vassal states, his vassal state has only 5 states and a population of only 900,000, which can be described as weak among many vassal states in the past. They had been living in the cracks of many vassal kings, so there was no intention of betraying the royal family in their hearts. But after King Wei was destroyed, he keenly felt that his opportunity was coming. Taking advantage of this time to join Xiaoming, he would definitely have a bright future in the future. His choice this time will also be speculative, and from the current situation, he seems to have made the right choice. Qi Shangin was silent, and after a while he said, "But father, now the attack on Yingzhou has already exhausted all the power of the vassal. If 100,000 people are finished in Yingzhou city, wouldn't the strength of the vassal state be greatly damaged? Those who achieve great things are not careful." The king of Huainan said, "It is the father's loyalty to the emperor to fight, but the strength is not enough. We also tried our best." Qi Shangin nodded when he heard the words. "I hope the emperor can understand his father's loyalty and courage, and let his father become a king of words from now on." While the two were talking, a general suddenly climbed up the city wall, and he said to the king of Huainan, "Your Highness, 2 merchant ships from Yingzhou have come from outside the city." And the merchants on board said that they were ordered by the emperor to send 50 artillery pieces for his royal highness, cannon. King Huainan was overjoyed when he heard the words. Really, the last commander did see the artillery on the ship, while the other ship was filled with shells and ammunition. It was said that the siege of the city was difficult because the city walls were strong. Just use the artillery to blow down the city wall, and someone on the ship would train the soldiers how to use it. "Artillery," said the general. When the king of Huainan heard the words, he burst into laughter. "Your Majesty is still thinking about this, king. I have long heard of the benefits of artillery. This time, the artillery is even more powerful." Qi Shangin's brows also stretched out. At first, he always suspected that Xiaoming was trying to hurt both of them, but now it seems that he misunderstood. After being excited, the two immediately followed the general to the Guangyu Pier to receive artillery pieces. In 5 days, they trained an artillery team consisting of 50 artillery pieces. After mastering the use of artillery proficiently, King Huainan and Qi Shangin personally led a mighty army to Yingzhou. Chapter 652 Seeking Bashu. A torrential rain suddenly covered Yingzhou. The tickling sound of rain outside the study and the damp smell of the rain soaking the land came to Xiaoming's face, allowing Xiaoming to find some childhood memories. For a while when I was a child, sitting under the eaves and watching the rain would always smell this natural fresh breath, but now the breath is stronger and refreshing. Faced with the pouring rain, Xiaoming frowned. A few days ago, he asked a caravan to send 50 artillery pieces to the king of Huainan. At this time, the king of Huainan must have received them. With these artillery pieces, the king of Huainan would have fewer casualties when attacking the city, and once the city was broken, the rest would be much simpler. In his opinion, King Yan was just at the end of the fight, and the performance of the Tian family and Ji family was enough to show the opportunistic nature of the wealthy family. For these wealthy families, they don't care who is ruling them, all they want is the prosperity of their own family. Now that King Yan has lost Baozhou, the remaining wealthy families must have different thoughts. At this time, it is impossible to resist the king of Huainan wholeheartedly. Perhaps when King Huainan broke down the city, King Yan's army would collapse, so in his opinion King Yan's destruction was close at hand, and King Lion could not last for a month. In this way, he removed 2 of the 3 kings of the north, and only the king of Zhao remained. This time, King Zhao had the fewest troops in the 3 king alliance. It can be seen that this old fox didn't like the 3 king alliance at all. Perhaps for King Zhao, he really only believed in the barbarians at this time. He removed King Yan and King Liang, but he did what he wanted, so he didn't need to do it himself this time. It was not Xiaoming's impulse to send 50 artillery pieces to King Huainan, but because in Xiaoming's opinion, he still needed the helper of King Huainan to help him deal with King Chu. He didn't want King Huainan to collapse after this battle. The only thing is that the king of Huainan has withdrawn his power to the south of the Yangtze River. He was thinking when an official eunuch suddenly walked towards Jindafu from the rain with an oil paper umbrella, said a few words, and the eunuch left. Jindafu walked in at this time, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Li Chuan, the Prince of Chu, Detain the third prince to King Zhao. Let him come to see me when the rain stops. Xiao Ming didn't show any surprise, because he received an urgent letter from the King of Chu 3 days ago. In the letter, the King of Chu made up a whole set of evasive words, implying that the third prince was the culprit of the farce of ascending the throne, and he was just being deceived. The second is that he is willing to be a minister, and then there's the matter of letting Li Chuiyun live in King Zhao. Simply put, he is letting Li Chuiyun be a proton to show his sincerity. Xiao Ming can only sneer at this trick. If he can't see this kind of slowdown, he doesn't have to be the emperor. However, the King of Chu made the right bet this time. Xiao Ming really didn't have the heart to move the King of Chu. After all, the most important issue now was to solve the problem in the north. His minimum requirement for the King of Chu was to make his feudal country a dumping ground for commodities. For the time being, he did not want the wealthy south to be beaten into a mess. The rain continued from early morning until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock, Li Chuiyun arrived at Xingyin with the third prince. Long live my emperor, long live, long live, long live. In the main hall, Li Chuiyun bowed and shouted exemption. Xiao Ming smiled. Although he hated Li Chuiyun from the bottom of his heart, he had to do his surface work. Only then did Li Chuiyun raise his head. This time he came to King Zhao to truly shock him. The prosperity and wealth of King Zhao exceeded his expectations. This also gave him a deeper understanding of Xiao Ming. Criminal Xiao Zhen sees the emperor. Long live my emperor, long live, long live. The main hall where the third prince and Li Chuiyun entered together. After Li Chuiyun shouted long live, the trapped third prince suddenly knelt down and shouted. Xiao Ming was a little surprised. He looked at the third prince. At this time, the third prince was very embarrassed, and his body was also much thinner. How could he still have the infinite beauty in Chang'an? Li Chuiyun took the opportunity to say, Your Majesty, the third prince has a false edict. If you hadn't believed him, it would have been impossible for your father to enshrine him as your king. I hope the emperor will investigate. Xiao Ming laughed, and he said, The King of Chu and the prince have been bothered. I will punish people who are so disobedient. A smile appeared on the corner of Li Chuiyun's mouth. So far, none of their strategies have been flawed. Xiao Ming paused for a while and continued. In the letter, the King of Chu said that the prince will live in King Zhao for a few years. I wonder what the prince thinks. When it comes to this matter, Li Chuiyun has long been prepared. He said, Thanks to the emperor's troubles, the minister has always yearned for King Zhao, and it is also the wish of the minister to stay in King Zhao. Very good, so, the prince will stay in King Zhao. Xiao Ming said lightly, and he didn't need to be too polite to proton. After saying a few words casually, Xiao Ming sent Li Chuiyun away, but left the third prince in the main hall. At this time, Xiao Ming looked at the third prince and said, Do you know why I want to leave you alone? Because the sinner is still useful to the emperor. The third prince seemed to have noticed it long ago in Chang'an. The ministers all said that the third prince is talented and intelligent, but now it seems to be true. Xiao Ming laughed. This is just the minister raising the guilty minister. The third prince lowered his head. He knew that the smarter the prince, the sooner he died. With a light snort, he said, King Yan is an outsider after all, but you are a member of the royal family. Now that the great Yu kingdom has become like this, how could this king choose to trust King Chu instead of you? The third prince's expression changed slightly, and he sighed and said, Your Majesty, the false inheritance edict was done by the sinner, but it was all ordered by the King of Chu. Otherwise, if there were no soldiers and no power, how could the sinner dare to ascend to the throne? Even so, your crime is enough for me to chop off your head 10,000 times. But now that the great Yu kingdom is in danger, if you can atone for your crimes, this king will spare you not to die. The third prince's voice was a little excited, and he said, The guilty minister will send a letter to the King of Shu and ask him to hold back the soldiers and horses of the King of Zhao. Xiao Ming nodded when he heard the words. This is why he kept the third prince. The King of Chu abandoned the third prince and also abandoned the fifth prince. After all, the third prince and the fifth prince were brothers. The fifth prince has always respected the third prince very much, and he has always obeyed the words of the third prince. The King of Chu's strategy was nothing more than a tactic to delay the army, and the fact that the King of Zhao attained the land of Shu was undoubtedly an opportunity for the north to fall into continuous war. Seeing this, Xiao Ming naturally didn't want to let the King of Chu's tricks succeed. Without the support of the King of Chu, the 5 emperors didn't know what kind of shit they could do. This time it's not as simple as a letter. The King of Shu is already at the end of his force. This king will send 20,000 horses to accompany you into Shu. You can only choose one if you want your life or power. Chapter 653, The Third Prince in Number 039, S Request. 20,000 soldiers enter Shu. The third prince's expression was a little stiff this time when the king of Chu betrayed him. He also betrayed the king of Shu. After all, the king of Shu would not be loyal to the king of Chu because of his rebelliousness. In this way, the king of Shu became a lonely man, and he could not last long in the face of the attack of the king of Zhao. After all, King Zhao mastered the forging technique of arquebuses and trained a group of musket teams. With muskets plus black armored cavalry and barbarian cavalry, the situation of the king of Shu was very difficult. If Xiaoming hadn't provided him with a batch of artillery to defend the city, it would be a question whether the king of Shu could survive until now. Therefore, in the view of the third prince, Xiaoming attached great importance to Bashu, otherwise he would not have abandoned the king of Shu who disliked him in the past. Provide artillery and ammunition. It was with this in mind that when the king of Chu decided to escort him to King Zhao, he had some luck in his heart, because to Xiaoming he still had a little use, but to the king of Chu he was a complete drag. This is just the first batch of soldiers. In my opinion, 20,000 elites are enough to help the king of Shu stop the king of Zhao from going south. Of course, the premise is that the king of Shu is a vassal to me. If he doesn't do it, the 20,000 people will be the last force to crush him. Straw, understand? Xiaoming's tone was beyond doubt. The third prince was silent for a while, and then he said, "Is it possible that the emperor let the criminals enter Shu to persuade the king of Shu to return to his heart? No, I want you to replace him. The king of Shu is stupid, but you are talented and smart. It is more suitable to hand Bashu to you. Leave it to the sinner? Isn't the emperor afraid that the sinner will occupy Bashu and support the troops?" The third prince was a little confused. Xiaoming laughed when he heard the words, "I just put you in charge of the government affairs of Bashu. I have the final say in this military matter. Do you think that these 20,000 people entered Shu just to help defend against King Zhao?" The third prince's heart sank. Only then did he understand what Xiaoming's plan was. Once the king of Shu declared himself a minister, Xiaoming could justifiably use the king of Shu to defend against the king of Zhao and revoke the king of the king in order to appease the king of Shu. Xiaoming asked him to replace the king of Shu, but all he could have was the name of the king of Shu, but there was no real king of Shu in him. Seeing that the third prince fell into silence, Xiaoming reminded him at this time, "For me, this is just a solution. Even if King Zhao occupies Bashu, I will only spend more money in the future. The alliance of the three kings has failed miserably. How can a single King Zhao be the emperor's opponent? The three princes, the emperor just can't bear the royal family to continue to kill each other. This is a chance for you to live and continue to enjoy the glory and wealth. If you miss it, it will be true. No more." Jin Dafu and Xiaoming sang double reeds. The third prince had a complicated expression and was obviously struggling in his heart. He asked, "What is the emperor going to do with the king of Shu? How about letting him be a leisurely prince?" Xiaoming took a sip of his tea and took a sip. For him, the most important thing now is to stabilize Bashu and prevent King Zhao's plan from succeeding. As for the third prince and the king of Shu, there is nothing to stay for the time being. After all, the two have no military power, but they are just fish on the chopping board. If the two of them can honestly be a leisurely prince, that's all. If they are not honest, they can kill them at any time, and if his plan is successful, he will be able to get the land of Bashu, avoid an expedition, and also restrain the expansion of the king of Zhao. The emperor's words are true. The third prince rolled his eyes, but he was not a fool. Xiaoming thought of everything he thought, so he said, "If the emperor is sincere, I hope the emperor can give the king of Shu and the criminals a gold medal. Sin cannot kill him, gold medal for avoidance." Xiaoming showed a confused look. Jin Dafu knew that Xiaoming was not very clear about the past of the Great Yu Kingdom, so he explained, "Your Majesty, at the beginning of the Great Yu Kingdom, the great ancestor once rewarded 3 generals under his command with the gold medals to avoid death, and set rules to avoid the death of gold medalists. You cannot kill unless you are guilty of treason." Xiaoming nodded when he heard the words. This death-free gold medal has also appeared in contemporary history. In fact, it was just a form of appeasement by the emperor to those who had merit. In the course of contemporary history, this death-free gold medal has been proven to be of little use. Since the crime of treason cannot be spared, as long as officials make a fuss about it, they can still kill them. After all, sometimes they say that you are guilty. Not guilty. Guilty is not guilty. But if the third prince can really change his mind and support him loyally, he doesn't have to kill him. So Xiaoming just thought about it for a while and said, "This is easy. As long as you do this for me, I will give you 2 gold medals to avoid death, so that you can enjoy a lifetime of prosperity." The third prince breathed a sigh of relief. This time he was right. For him, let things continue to develop. He and his younger brother are just dead words. Now it is a fortune that Gugu is alive. Thank you, Emperor Longjin. The third prince bowed deeply. Xiaoming was even satisfied in his heart. If he won Yan, Liang, Zhao, and then Bashu, he would be untouchable in the Great Yu Kingdom. The two reached an agreement. Xiaoming asked Jin Dafu to arrange a residence for the third prince in Qingzhou City. When 20,000 soldiers came back from the front line, he would send the third prince and these soldiers to enter along the Yangtze River on battleships and merchant ships. Bashu, after all, the king of Huainan, was attached, and the warships along the Yangtze River could be supplied, and the feudal kingdom between the king of Shu and the king of Huainan was just a king of Ruang, who only owned the land of 3 states, which was equivalent to the junction of contemporary western Hubei and Chongqing at the same time. Entering Shu this time is also a deterrent to King Ruang. Now only King Ruang has not contacted him, and he does not know what King Ruang is thinking after taking control of Bashu. This King Ruang was caught between the king of Huainan and the Bashu under his control. He believed that King Ruang would not be able to sit still at this time. When the third prince left, Jin Dafu said again, "Your Majesty. In addition to the third prince, Quizuir, the daughter of the king of Huainan, has also arrived in Qingzhou. Does the emperor want to see what this Quizuir looks like? The emperor has worked hard day and night these past few days. It's for fun." Speaking of this, Jin Dafu suddenly laughed. The fly. In his opinion, it was normal for the emperor to accept the concubine. Xiaoming's heart moved slightly when he heard the words, but he thought about it and dismissed the idea. After all, since Quizuir was here, he would have to go to the palace to see the Empress Dowager soon. At this time, he would accompany the Empress Dowager to see her. Moreover, Fei Yuir was pregnant and was about to give birth. At this time, he was playing with the romantic affairs. He was still a little uneasy, and he didn't want to be caught by the ministers. Thinking of this, he said to Jin Dafu, "That's all. Why don't you follow me to see how this palace is built?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 654 Considerations of the Newspaper Office. After the heavy rain, a pure blue sky emerged from the dense dark clouds, and the sun shines through the gap, which is as moving as if the sky is auspicious. Jin Dafu looked up at the sky and said, "Your Majesty, it looks like it's going to be sunny today, but I can go out." This old slave is called Zhao Long and Zhao Hu. Xiaoming nodded when he heard the words. He also went back and changed into a casual suit at this time. For him, he still didn't want to walk outside with the great fanfare. It would be too conspicuous to wear a dragon robe. Moreover, when he was in Qingzhou, he was used to visiting the city and outside the city from time to time. It was very uncomfortable to stay in Xingyin every day. When he returned to the bedroom, he stopped by to see Fei Yuir. This girl is very sleepy now, and his movement when changing clothes did not wake her up, preventing Xiaohun from waking Fei Yuir. Xiaoming went out to the south of the city under the protection of the guards. For Xiaoming, the ideal capital is of course Yaozhou, but for him, Yaozhou is still suitable as a capital for the time being. After all, the current Yaozhou is poor, and the infrastructure of the city is very poor. According to Pang Yukin's words, it is a state, but in fact it is not even a county in Qingzhou. Therefore, after thinking about it again and again, Xiaoming still plans to use Qingzhou as the capital, and then consider moving the capital after the development of Yaozhou, but this time is estimated to be about 20 to 30 years. Your Majesty, there is a lot of fun outside, but our Qingzhou is getting more and more lively. Jin Dafu smiled, which made his originally small eyes become a slit. Zhao Long said, "The people here are all businessmen and wealthy families. They are very shrewd. They know that the emperor has no disadvantage. This Qingzhou is as stable as Mount Tai, and there will be no wars. It's not just businessmen and wealthy families. During this time, there have been more refugees outside the city. The government office has set up a lot of places to cook porridge outside the city." Zhao Hu added, compared with before, the two of them are more energetic now. After all, they no longer talk about the palace guards, but become the imperial guards. This makes many soldiers of the Qingzhou army envious. In the past, many people were unwilling to be this idler of Xiaoming. Now looks a bit like someone who is released from the detention center in the first half of the year. Since he ascended the throne, he has found that his freedom of action is far less than before. The daily itinerary is basically the government hall, the study room, and the bedroom. The big and small things in Qingzhou City are reflected to him through the mouth of the officials, and he also conveys his will through Jin Dafu. Suddenly, he turned into a canary in a cage, and Xiaoming had an instinctive vigilance against this closed environment. Being familiar with the history books, he knew very well that the emperors of all dynasties were so confused by the powerful ministers and the eunuchs around him, because everything he knew came from the mouths of others. He can only listen to what others say, so naturally he will get a lot of untrue and opinionated information. However, Xiaoming is also prepared for this situation. This is the secret guard, and this is his outside eyes. It's just that the secret guards also have their own limitations. In this era of traffic basically relying on walking, and sending orders basically relying on roaring, most of the limited secret guards are used to monitor important people, and basically people's lives cannot be reported in time. Based on this, he has been thinking about ways to obtain real information for the past 2 days. After much deliberation, this problem can only be solved by allowing the newspaper to achieve fair reporting. Just as Niu Ben was worried that Xiaoming would let the powerful family gain power, it is now an obvious fact that every official and general has his own ideas and considerations for the army. He can only consider the nationalization of the army. Of course, the nationalization of the army is just a false proposition. For him, the essence of the nationalization of the army is the royal words of the army. He must ensure his absolute leadership over the army and prevent generals from turning the army into his own private army. After all, in the future, his army will compete for colonies with Western powers, and he does not want his generals to occupy a colony and stand on their own. As for officials, in addition to dividing 2 groups of mutual supervision between the DPRK and China, he is also preparing to adopt a top-down supervision model. This model is the newspaper he thought of. After all, contemporary facts have proved that the disclosure of the media has played a very good role in exposing the corruption of officials, and it is also conducive to supervising officials. The only shortcoming is that there is only one newspaper office in Qingzhou, which will make some newspaper articles too subjective, so he plans to establish 2 more newspaper offices in Qingzhou, and open 2 newspaper offices to businessmen at the same time. That is to say, there will be 3 official newspaper offices and 2 private newspaper offices in Qingzhou, so that the diversified competition will allow some hidden scandals to be uncovered. Thinking about what to do next, the group reached the south of the city unknowingly. At this time, a building complex was gradually taking shape under the work of the construction camp. He is more concerned about the palace, which may live in the palace for 20 or 30 years in the future, so the design of the palace is basically from his own hands. In addition to the formal buildings, there are secret passages for escape and the like. Of course, the original intention of the design is to give the palace some modern flavor, so the construction of the palace uses a large number of brick and wood structures. Compared with the pure wood structure, this structure is much stronger build time. After all, using red bricks to build a wall is much easier than a carpenter's job, and among these red bricks, he also asked the craftsman to reserve a porcelain pipe, which will be reserved for future wiring. It is precisely based on this simple design that the construction speed of the palace is unprecedented. According to this way, it only takes 8 months to move in. According to the normal speed, the palace cannot be built in 5 years and 10 years. Your Majesty, this construction camp is really good. This old slave has never seen a palace built like this in such a short period of time. At this time, the construction of the city wall and the palace gate of the palace had been completed, and the city wall was also dyed red. A group of people entered along the palace gate. The front was a step, and the steps went up from the bottom to the front of the Xingdaguangguang Hall. This Xingdaguangguang Hall is the place where the palace discusses its affairs. The reason why it was named Xingdaguangguang is to always alert the officials. Compared with a luxurious palace in Chang'an, Xiaoming's requirements for his own palace are simple, so he didn't ask for anything like the white jade stairs, and he used whatever could be sourced locally. This is the place where the concubines and concubines live, each with a separate courtyard. On the right side of the palace is the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is the place of the eunuchs, and on the left side is the East Palace in general. The general layout of his palace is somewhat similar to the palace in Chang'an, but there are also different places. This is the boiler water tower that stands in the palace. While Xiaoming was examining his future palace, a great change that swept the Yan kingdom quietly occurred. Chapter 655 The Death of King Yan. P.S. There are 2 more chapters today, but it will be a little later. September 16th, after 5 days of marching, King Huainan and Kui Shangan led 100,000 Huainan soldiers to set up camp under Yingcheng. After 3 days of preparation, Kui Shangan ordered the artillery to bombard Yingzhou city, causing chaos in Yingzhou city. Artillery, another artillery. How could King Huainan have an artillery? This must be done by Xiaoming. It must be him in the temporary palace. King Yan was furious. The reason why he was so confident in Yingzhou city was that 60 artillery pieces were installed in the city. These artillery pieces were part of his purchase of artillery pieces from King Zhao. It was because he was confident in the power of these artillery pieces that he scoffed at the king of Huainan, because he believed that his artillery would definitely knock down the king of Huainan's army. But now everything was beyond his expectations. King Huainan not only had artillery, but the range of the artillery was far higher than that of the artillery in Yingzhou city. Now Yingzhou city could only be bombarded by the artillery of the king of Huainan in vain, and he couldn't use the artillery to fight back, which made him suddenly furious. Only then did he realize that he was deceived by Xiaoming, and Xiaoming never sold the real artillery to them from beginning to end. Father, if we continue like this, our city walls will collapse. Kui Cheng's voice was a little difficult. Hundreds of thousands of people besieged the city, and the siege of Yingzhou city was blocked by the dense number of soldiers. Now they can't beat it, and they can't escape. So what if it collapses? How can this king's soldiers be born by relying on the city wall? King Yan suddenly pulled out his sword. This time this king will personally lead the army and fight to the death with the king of Huainan. Having said that, King Yan strode towards Nancheng, which was the key area where King Huainan attacked. This time, Kui Cheng and Kui Hao did not rush up with the king of Chu. Kui Cheng looked at Kui Hao and said, "Now that the wealthy people in the city have descended, they will never fight against the king of Huainan with us, and the father and the king will not listen to the advice to Xiaoming. As a minister, what should I do now?" Kui Hao's face was full of despair. He said, "I have been in Yingzhou for more than a month, and from what I have seen and heard, I still expected that the three kings' allied forces would be defeated, but I never thought that the defeat would be so complete now. Bear the brunt. What's the use of mentioning this now? I'm just asking if Xiaoming told you when you were in Yingzhou that he would spare Yan Kingdom." Kui Cheng said eagerly. Xiaoming did ask Pang Yukin to tell me about this before the foolish brother left. He said that unless King Yan pleads guilty and voluntarily gives up the king and the kingdom, he will not let the kingdom of Yan go. Kui Hao said. When Kui Cheng heard the words, he was silent for a moment. In his opinion, this was absolutely impossible. He sighed deeply, took out his saber and chased after King Yan. Seeing Kui Cheng leave, Kui Hao turned around and walked in the opposite direction. When Xiaoming ascended the throne, he saw that the three kings' allied forces might have accomplished nothing. Pang Yukin did say that to him, but he also mentioned that if he is willing to help, he will be protected in the future. He is only the second son of King Yan. For him, the land of this kingdom will not belong to him in any case. Now he is more worried about his own life than the state of Yan. Under such a situation, after leaving the temporary palace, Kui Hao walked straight to an alley. When he reached the house, he knocked 6 times, and the door was opened. At this time in the yard, some wealthy families have gathered. These wealthy families are all people who oppose King Yan's continued fight with Huainan. After all, the outcome is now divided, and not everyone is willing to die with King Yan. "Prince, when will the army be raised?" asked a noble clan chief. "My father has already climbed to the city, and I'm just waiting for the artillery of King Huainan to blow down the city wall. At this time, the city must be in chaos. That's when I wait for the troops to start." Kui Hao's eyes flickered. He thought, "Father, you treat me ruthlessly. Don't blame me for being unrighteous. The elder brother enjoyed the melting in Yan state, but you sent me to Yingzhou to suffer." The nobles nodded when they heard the words, just waiting for the city to break down. Outside the city, 50 artillery pieces were continuously shelling the southern city gate, and the fragile southern city wall continued to have deep potholes under the artillery collapse. "Father, the city wall has fallen." Kui Shangan was pleasantly surprised, and he immediately prepared to lead the troops into the city. "Slow. It's not the time yet." King Huainan looked at the collapsed city gate on the east side of the main gate, and then to the west side. At this time, the artillery at the west gate was still intact, and he said, "Now concentrate the artillery bombarding the west city wall. Once the wall collapses, attack the city immediately." At this moment, Kui Shangan looked at Zicheng and realized something. He said, "The artillery given by the emperor is really powerful. King Yan's artillery couldn't hit us at all, but we kept hitting." The king of Huainan looked gloomy. He said, "This is what makes the emperor so powerful. He has long been wary of us vassal kings, so he sold some inferior artillery to King Yan." King Liang, King Zhao and others. Could it be that the emperor had already seen the chaos in the Great Chu Congress? Kui Shanggan asked in shock. The king of Huainan said, "Who knows this? But this alone is enough to show that our emperor is not a simple role." When the two were talking, the city wall of the West City also collapsed under the shelling. At this time, King Huainan and Kui Shanggan were shocked at the same time. Immediately afterwards, the sound of war drums rang through the entire battlefield, and the Huainan army soldiers who were in high morale roared and rushed towards Yingzhou city. In the city of Yingzhou, King Yan and his personal guards escaped the collapsed city wall in embarrassment. King Yan's eyes were red with blood. He held his saber and shouted, "Soldier, fight to the death with this king and the enemy." His voice fell, except for the guards who shouted loudly. The other soldiers were insensitive, and some of the strong men who had just been pulled into the army even trembled with fear when have they seen such a powerful weapon as artillery. Not to mention that they were forced to join the army kill. The Huainan army poured in from the two collapsed places at the same time, and the well-equipped soldiers immediately fought with the soldiers defending the city. Some noble families who supported King Yan also fought bloody battles with the Huainan army with their troops. For a while, there were screams and fighting sounds all over the city wall. The corpses of soldiers from both sides fell on the ground, and blood was flowing on the ground. King Yan led his personal guards into battle in person, and just as he was about to kill, a loud shout of killing suddenly sounded in the city, and a group of noble tribes with red cloth strips on their foreheads rushed out from the streets and alleys. It's just that they did not fight with the Huainan army, but fought with the Chu army, the noble clan who supported him. At this time, the morale of the Chu army collapsed instantly. At this moment, King Yan seemed to have lost all of his strength. Just as he was stunned, a general of the Huainan army stabbed his sword into King Yan's chest, spitting out a mouthful of blood. King Yan gradually sank into the darkness. Chapter 656 Death of the Fourth Prince. King Yan is dead. King Yan is dead, one of the guards protecting King Yan shouted, and the other guards suddenly looked at King Yan, who was lying in a pool of blood. At this moment, all the guards lost their will to fight, and they all fled after the guards collapsed. The soldiers also lost their will to fight. Now that King Yan is dead, who would continue to work for King Yan? Soon, the news of King Yan's death spread to all parts of Yingzhou city along with the scattered soldiers. Under the influence of this news, the Yan army was in chaos. Kui Shanggan was very keenly aware of the changes in the Yan army, and he immediately led his soldiers to launch a fierce attack. At this time, the Yan army, which was already disillusioned, kept retreating, and more Huainan soldiers poured into the city at this time. At the same time that King Huainan attacked Yingzhou, Li San arrived in Bazhou. According to Xiao Ming's plan, when Yingzhou city was destroyed, the fourth prince should also die. After meeting the Yuan and Ji clan heads in Bazhou, Li San mentioned the killing of the fourth prince. Kill the fourth prince. Tian Wen said in shock. Ji Tong, the head of the Ji family, was also surprised. He said, "Commander Li, is this really the emperor's order?" Li San rolled his eyes. It was Xiao Ming's idea to kill the fourth prince, but Xiao Ming couldn't take it upon himself. After all, killing his brother is an unkind thing, and it will even become the reason for being criticized in the future. So he said, "This matter can only be understood and cannot be described in words. It's just that if the two of you do it, you will naturally please the Holy One. As for whether to do it or not, it's up to the two of you." Tian Wen and Ji Tong looked at each other. Both of them were smart people. They understood what Li San meant in that case. "Please let Li Tong lead us to discuss it." Tian Wen said. Li San nodded. "Since that's the case, I won't disturb the two of you." After that, Li San turned around and left. At this time, Tian Wen said, "It seems to be the emperor's intention at this time, but the emperor does not want to be charged with killing his brother." "That's right, it's just that if we kill the fourth prince, and the emperor crosses the river and demolishes the bridge in the future, I'm afraid our end will not be easy." "That's the case, but if it pleases the emperor, the status of our two families will also be preserved." Tian Wen looked forward to it. Ji Tong pondered for a while, and said, "But I have a way. Rashly killing the fourth prince is a very sinful crime, but if the fourth prince's crime is brought out, he will be put in prison, and then committed suicide in the prison. Wouldn't it have nothing to do with us?" "Yeah, Brother Ji is really brilliant. Since that's the case, we will invite the fourth prince at noon today and put on a Huangman banquet." Tian Wen laughed. Ji Tong also laughed. At the same time at noon, the fourth prince arrived with the guards as scheduled. Tian Wen set up a banquet in the mansion and was waiting for him and his generals. In the side rooms on both sides of the main hall, Ji Tong led the part and could only throw a cup for Tian Wen. "No thank you Tian Yuan for your kindness. The fourth prince bowed his hands. Tian Wen said kindly, His Royal Highness has been in Bazhao for more than a year, and it is a shame that I have only taken the time to invite His Highness and all the generals to come for a banquet. The staff is serious. Speaking of which, this king doesn't understand the rules, so he didn't come to visit. The fourth prince sat down and was about to become the new king of Yan. He was very happy. After a pause, the fourth prince asked, Tian Yuanwei invited us to come to discuss Bazhao's government affairs. I don't know what Yuanwei wants to discuss. When everyone was seated, Tian Wen said in a serious tone, A few days ago, the common people complained to a certain person, saying that a lot of fertile fields were taken by His Highness and included in Huangzhuang, and His Highness also collected taxes from them privately. I don't know how His Highness explained this matter. The expression of the fourth prince froze for a moment, and the other households immediately became quiet after hearing the words, each with a look of horror on their faces. He really did this thing. Speaking of which, he didn't trust King Yan or these Bazhao nobles, so he took advantage of the time when King Yan was driven away to occupy land and collect taxes to enrich his treasury for conscription. After all, there is no army that he can trust. He has always been the puppet of these wealthy families, but the land he occupied was owned by King Yan and his heir, as well as officials who fled with King Yan. He originally thought that the Tian family and the Ji family would turn a blind eye, but he didn't expect Tian Wen to mention this at this time. Turning his eyes, the fourth prince smiled and said, What is the meaning of this, outside member? What do you mean? The matter of His Royal Highness King Yan has not yet been decided. It is unknown whether this King Yan is His Highness. It is not appropriate for His Royal Highness to occupy the land at this time. After all, the current land is logically owned by the Emperor. Don't mind it, the governor of Bazhao? Yuanwei is joking. When did Yuanwei become the governor? The fourth prince sneered again and again. At this time, Tian Wen took out the imperial decree brought by Li San. He said, This is the imperial decree. The sage has already named someone as the prefect of Bazhao. As the prefect of Bazhao, the lower officials are responsible for administering the royal property for the emperor. The fourth prince was shocked. His eyes narrowed. Xiao Ming sealed Tian Wen, but he did not pay attention to him. He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart, so he said, Tian Shi, everything pays attention to evidence. Don't convict me based on the nonsense of a few people. Tian Wen said coldly, Then I will convince you. Come here, bring the account book. As Tian Wen's voice fell, the door of the side room suddenly opened, and Ji Tong rushed out with each of his minions, and surrounded the fourth prince and the others. This scene made the face of the fourth prince and the family general turn pale. He vaguely understood something. He sneered and said, Xiao Ming is really high. After holding back for so long, he is finally going to do something to me. Humph, there is this ledger that records all your criminal evidence. Tian Wen pointed to the ledger in his hand. What else do you have to say? How could the fourth prince be willing to be captured? Now that he was caught in Tian Wen's trap, he still remained calm. Tian Shi, don't forget, we are all grasshoppers on a rope. You think the emperor will let you go in the future? Is this imperial decree able to make you a prefect today, and you will be killed tomorrow? If so, why is this necessary? You and I join forces. It is not our decision to make this country of Yan. When the time comes, the glory and wealth will be enjoyed by itself. Endless. It's ridiculous. Do you think that the few people you recruited privately will be the emperor's opponents? You really have a good plan, but how can we be like you? Tian Wen said at this time, Fourth Prince, your ambitions are very clear. Gee, if you want to blame it, you are too greedy. Not only we know about this private soldier, but the emperor also knows it clearly. After all, Ji Tong immediately asked Bu Chu to detain the fourth prince and others and put them in prison. The next day, Li San got the news that the fourth prince committed suicide in prison. At this time, he immediately sent a secret guard to the prison to confirm it. Sure enough, as Tian Wen said, he sneered twice. Tian Wen and Ji Tong are really old foxes. Now that the fourth prince is dead, it is only necessary to get rid of King Yan and the Prince of Yan, and the country of Yan will be stable. Chapter 657, The Destruction of the Yan Kingdom. As night fell, King Weinan and Kui Shangan stopped their attack after King Yan was killed in the chaotic army. The Yan army fell into chaos, and they took the opportunity to invade the city, but they never thought that the smooth battle was reversed because of the appearance of Kui Chang. This time, King Yan had recruited many strong men to deal with him, and there were 250,000 people in the small Yingzhou. After a fierce battle, they were driven out of the city again. This Kui Guo has some skills, but most of the Yan army has fled during the day, and I am afraid that more soldiers will flee tonight. just thinking that the Yan army will definitely spend their energy on blocking the deserters, and they will not think that we will take advantage of this night attack. Kui Shangin nodded. He had already prepared 10,000 elites to attack the Yingzhou camp at night. After midnight, he led the soldiers to enter Yingzhou city quietly through the broken city wall just as the king of Huainan had guessed. More and more soldiers entered the Heian army camp and fled, and the soldiers on patrol were constantly attracted by the fleeing soldiers in the dark. The patrolmen could not patrol the deserters or the enemy. In this case, Kui Shangin quickly led the soldiers to the Yingzhou camp to light the arrows. At this time, the Yingzhou camp was brightly lit, and Kui Shangin gave the order. After receiving the order, more than a dozen torches were lit, and the soldiers took out arrows wrapped in oilcloth at the front and lit them one by one, and the bows and arrows were wound put. Following Kui Shangin's order, the sky filled with flaming arrows flew towards the Yan army's camp, and those arrows accurately landed on the head of the Yan army's tent. The fire spread instantly, and the Yan army camp was brightly illuminated when the soldiers ignited the arrows. The Yan army's sentry had already spotted them and immediately shouted loudly, but they had no time to stop them. The arrows of flame flew to the Yan army camp one by one in just a few minutes. The Yan army's camp became a sea of fire. The sky-high fire lit up the night sky. At this time, King Huainan led the soldiers from outside the city and rushed into the city immediately. Kui Shangin's purpose was only to disrupt the Yingzhou camp and create chaos. The Yan army's camp fell into chaos. At this time, the king of Huainan stood up and shouted, "Kill! Kill!" What responded to him was the angry shouts of Huainan soldiers, who rushed into the city of Yingzhou like tigers descending from the mountain. A Yan army soldier woke up from his sleep. In the flames that filled the sky, he rushed out of the tent before he could even put on his clothes, but the soldiers of the Huainan army came all over him. Before he could make any shouts, he felt his chest froze, and then he watched his blood gushing out from his chest, and before dying, the extreme fear made him let out a final scream. The Huainan army rushed into the camp like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. As soon as those Yan army soldiers rushed out of the camp, they died under their swords, and some even had their hearts pierced in their sleep. Chaos quickly spread in the Yan army camp. The whole camp was filled with a breath of death. Kui Cheng summoned the soldiers under the escort of his personal guards. 3 points, a voice was telling him that the Yan army was all over this time. Those Huainan soldiers in armor were like slaughtering cattle and sheep, leaving only cold corpses wherever they went. He had organized several attacks, but he was shocked. The terrified soldiers were quickly disintegrated without any resistance at all. In the daytime, he was able to repel the Huainan army because his subordinates did not know about King Yan's death in battle. Now that all the soldiers knew about it, the morale of the Yan army fell to the bottom. "Prince, let's go. It will be too late if you don't go," a general said, covering his arm. At this time, his arm was dripping with blood. It was scratched by a soldier. "Help him resist. His life is estimated to be gone." Kui Cheng looked at the large camp in a sea of flames, stomped his feet fiercely, got on his horse, and fled towards Zimin under the guard of dozens of cavalry. When Kui Shangin attacked, King Huainan led his soldiers to capture the west gate of the Yan army according to the plan. They still used artillery in the dark night. Although King Huainan had already seen the power of firearms, he did not expect that such weapons could produce huge effects in war. Destructive power. The Yan army soldiers guarding the gate were at least 3,000 or 4,000 people, but a few rounds of artillery fire knocked down all these Yan army soldiers. After capturing the west gate, the king of Huainan said to a cavalry general beside him, "General Qi, it's up to you to chase down the routed troops." "Yes, Your Highness," and then he shouted, "Soldiers, it's time to harvest the enemy's heads. Rush, kill." The soldiers fought with high spirits. The rumbling sound of horses' hooves was beating like a drum, and when they heard this sound, the soldiers of the Yan army completely lost their will to fight and fled one after another. Most of them put down their weapons and surrendered to the Huainan army. When King Huainan and Kui Shangin entered the barracks, they encountered little resistance along the way, and there were soldiers of the Yan army kneeling on the ground everywhere, leading the cavalry to disintegrate the last resistance of the Yan army. The soldiers of the Huainan army did not stop but lit their torches and chased westward directly. They had already learned that Kui Cheng had fled westward. However, the king of Huainan was not in a hurry, because the west city gate had already been captured by them, and at the same time other city gates had been captured one after another, and now Kui Cheng had nowhere to escape. Therefore, he simply ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Because of the raid, most of the Yan army soldiers did not mount their horses, and a large number of war horses were tied in the stables, which made him a great deal. In addition to the war horses, he also captured many people of the Yan army. He ordered the people who did not resist not to be killed. The number of people captured this time was as high as 50,000 people, plus the soldiers who surrendered and captured nearly 80,000 people. 13,000 Yan people became prisoners. The operation to clear the battlefield continued until the next morning, when the cavalry of the Huainan army returned, and General Qi, who was headed, carried Kui Cheng's head in his hand in front of King Huainan. General Qi got off his horse and threw Kui Cheng's head on the ground. He said, "Your Highness." Kui Cheng refused to surrender and was killed by the last general. The king of Huainan nodded. The state of Yan had been oppressing the state of Huainan, so he hated King Yan very much. Now that King Yan is dead, so is Kui Cheng. But he suddenly thought of a question and said, "This king remembers that Kui Cheng has a younger brother, Kui Hao. Where's he?" At this time, Kui Shangan said, "Father, after Kui Cheng learned that Kui Hao had rebelled, he took his troops and slaughtered the nobles who participated in the rebellion, and Kui Hao was killed by him." "Really?" In this way, King Yan's lineage is completely cut off. The king of Huainan sighed, "This country of Yan is destroyed." Chapter 658 Unification is imminent. The season is already autumn, and compared to the sweltering heat of midsummer, today's King's Hao city is cooler than it was a few days ago. After visiting the palace 5 days ago, Xiao Ming put the matter of the newspaper office on the agenda. This newspaper is also known as the media in later generations. In addition to having top-down supervision, the most important role of the media is to guide public opinion. After the establishment of the newspaper, he took advantage of the characteristics of the newspaper to consolidate his rights. However, King's Hao is becoming more and more prosperous, and there are more and more things happening every day. The layout of a newspaper is far from meeting the current needs of King's Hao. With this in mind, he finally decided to increase the number of newspapers. However, whether the newly added newspapers are government-run or privately run, the newspapers also need to be reviewed before publishing, rather than letting these newspapers report whatever they want from later generations. Xiao Ming knew that the media was a double-edged sword. If this position was not occupied by himself, it would be occupied by the enemy in the future. Therefore, whether it is official or private, this newspaper must be surnamed Wang, and it cannot run counter to his will in terms of principle. Your Majesty, if a newspaper office is added, what should be done with the reporters who were sent to various states and counties? In the Hall of State Council, Fan Zheng said aloud that he is wearing a red official robe and is a fourth-rank official after ascending the throne. Xiao Ming naturally promoted his old department vigorously, and Fan Zheng did not pull it down as the name suggests. The mission of the ambassador is to be responsible for the internal and external publicity of the imperial court, as well as to censor other newspapers and newspapers in the future. After pondering for a while, Xiao Ming said, "The real duty of a reporter is to record the suffering of the people, not to read newspapers. After you retreat from the DPRK, you will include all these newspaper readers in the Central Propaganda Department. Their responsibilities will remain the same, but they will not change with a newspaper office. It doesn't matter, propaganda will be propaganda from now on, and reporters will only be reporters." "Yes, Your Majesty." Fan Zheng was overjoyed. The addition of a newspaper office this time is undoubtedly a happy event for him. Before, he only managed one newspaper office, but now he can manage 5. Moreover, his current status seems to have jumped out of the newspaper office and become a vital institution of the imperial court. Now Xiao Ming has brought the scholars who read newspapers into the imperial court, and he has a lot of people under his command. Pang Yuken and Fiji had no idea about the newspaper office at all. The two still couldn't understand what role the Central Propaganda Department would play in the future, so they kept silent about Xiao Ming's idea of adding a newspaper office. Fan Zheng returned to the train, when Liu Ben came out of the queue and said loudly, "Your Majesty, the battle report of King Huainan came from Yingzhou City. King Yan and his eldest son Kui Cheng were both killed, and the second son Kui Hao was also killed." Cut off as soon as Liu Ben's words came out, the whispers of the officials resounded in the council hall, and an atmosphere of ecstasy enveloped the council hall. "Congratulations, Your Majesty, Hexi Your Majesty, from now on, the Great Yu Kingdom will have no trouble with the Yan Kingdom." Pang Yuken looked excited. Fiji also said, "The country of Yan has been destroyed, and His Majesty is one step closer to the day of the Great Yu Kingdom. Next, we only need to go out to King Liang and King Zhao, and this northern country will be settled." Xiao Ming laughed at this moment. In fact, he had already received the news in advance. Not only was King Yan's line cut off, but the fourth prince also died in the prison. Now the Yan kingdom has no leader, just waiting for him to send officials to govern. King Yan is dead, and there will be no more Yan state from now on. Pang Xiaofu and Fei Jialao, the two of you have drawn up a list of officials to be sent to Yan. After reviewing, I will send these officials to the state and county to serve. Yes, Your Majesty. The two of them bowed in response at the same time. After a pause, Xiao Ming looked at Niu Ben again, and he said, the kingdom of Yan is destroyed. How long will this kingdom of Liang wait? Niu Ben could hear a hint of dissatisfaction from Xiao Ming's tone. King Weinan successfully captured Yingzhou city, but now the army of Fengao has not captured Qingzhou, which is really unreasonable. However, this time, Lu Fei and others did not destroy the Yan kingdom for a long time. Niu Ben said, Your Majesty, Lu Fei and Luo Hong led 50,000 soldiers who should have arrived at the city of Qingzhou, but they killed one on the way to Qingzhou. Barbarian cavalry. Xiao Ming frowned at the same time. The atmosphere in the Hall of State Council became solemn. The barbarians, the northern enemy whose expression changed from the officials of the Great Yu Kingdom, finally couldn't hold back. The expressions of the officials were taken in by Xiao Ming one by one. The officials from Chang'an all showed fear on their faces, while the officials headed by Pang Yukan were calm. Niu Ben continued, the last commander also had to fight Lu Fei to send back the news that this group of barbarian cavalry numbered 50,000 people. They did not fight Lu Fei directly, but kept attacking the grain road, which made Lu Fei unable to do so. Not sending a large number of troops to protect food and grass delayed the attack on Zheongju. 50,000 people? Xiao Ming frowned. The cavalry sent by the barbarians to Qingzhou was 50,000 people. How could it be such a coincidence? Back to the emperor, this group of cavalry was sent to Qingzhou by the barbarians. According to the prisoners captured by Lu Fei, with the help of the barbarians, now the kings of Zhao and Liang have abandoned their previous grudges, and now they want to join forces to deal with our attack together. Xiao Ming let out a light sigh of relief. He said, the king announced the news that the barbarians have sent troops to help the Raya defend against the Japanese, and now they have no time to go south. This time, the barbarians did not send other cavalry, but they cut me off with 50,000 cavalry, just to delay the time. In fact, it is unable to send a large army to support. General Niu should take this opportunity to destroy Liang and Zhao in one fell swoop. We cannot delay it any longer. Once the barbarians withdraw from Guerrilla and go south in large numbers, the country will have no peace. Niu Ben suddenly felt that the burden on his shoulders was a little heavier. After the defeat of the Three Kings Alliance, Xiao Ming's strategy changed accordingly. Compared with a conservative past, Xiao Ming's military strategy is now more radical, and the strong combat effectiveness of the Fengao army makes him very confident. He believes that unifying the north is no longer a problem. After unifying the north, he could keep the barbarians out of the Great Wall and implement the strategy of keeping the enemy out of the country. Yes, Your Majesty, the last commander will go to Qingzhou soon to destroy King Liang. Niu Ben said with his fists folded, nodding lightly. Xiao Ming glanced at Wen and Wu Zhao, and when he saw that no one was listed again, he gave Jin Dafu a look. Jin Dafu suddenly shouted, if you have something to do, play early. If you have nothing to go back to the court. All the courtiers were fine and were about to leave the court. At this time, Lin Wentao in the corner of the council hall suddenly woke up from a dream. He said in a hurry, Your Majesty, the minister has something to report. Lin Wentao's voice immediately attracted everyone's attention, because the officials knew that many of the strange things in Qingzhou came from Lin Wentao. Xiao Ming also showed an expression of interest. He said, what is Aking going to do, Emperor? Xiaoguan has recently built a steam locomotive according to the Emperor's instructions. I wonder if the Emperor is going to watch it? Chapter 659 The First Steam Locomotive. P.S. There are still chapters, but they will be later. Steam locomotive? What? This Lin Wentao is really weird, and I don't know what happened this time. He dares to say in the court that it must be something very important. The officials in the government hall were talking a lot. In their eyes, people like Lin Wentao have always been mysterious and unpredictable, and because these people don't participate in government affairs, they don't pay much attention to Lin Wentao. The officials did not understand, but Xiao Ming understood. After overcoming the problem of steam engines, Lin Wentao shifted his focus to the use of steam engines. During this time, Xiao Ming has been in Qingzhou. When he is free, he will go to Lin Wentao's workshop to discuss with him various types of machinery powered by steam engines. The steam locomotive and steamship are naturally the focus of the discussion between the two, but it is difficult to build an ironclad ship with a steam engine without a modern shipyard. So he focused on the steam locomotive. Having lived here for 5 years, Xiao Ming's deepest impression is that there is too much traffic in this era. Both military transportation and material transportation are quite slow, and this slow pace severely restricts the development of industry. Because of the advent of the steam engine, the consumption of industrial materials in Qingzhou has now risen by more than one notch. While the efficiency of transportation has hardly changed, therefore, he personally instructed and taught Lin Wentao using technology SPAR. With sufficient industrial capacity, the steam locomotive was successfully manufactured. Kings must not understand what a steam locomotive is. Today I will take you to have a look. Xiao Ming said. Now Qingzhou steam engine and steel making technology have completed a leap, which means that Qingzhou can produce all the steel accessories needed by the Western Industrial Revolution. In this way, the following logical thing is the explosive appearance of various steam machines, and this is what he will do next. With the fall of Qingyan and the gradual stabilization of the North, his desire to establish and improve the industrial system should also be realized step by step. For this reason, in addition to handling government affairs, Xiao Ming plans to personally participate in the construction of the industrial system. And 5 years of talent preparation have also allowed him to have a group of available people. I will obey, said the ministers, who were also very interested in steam locomotives. Nodding his head, Xiao Ming took the officials and accompanied Lin Wentao to the steam engine workshop. Your Majesty, this is a steam locomotive, Lin Wentao said excitedly. At this time, the steam locomotive was parked on a section of 100-meter-long railroad tracks. The moment he saw the front of the locomotive, Xiao Ming suddenly felt a familiar feeling. Now this thing is a modern steam locomotive, commonly known as a tube car. In simple terms, this steam locomotive is a side-sleeping steam engine fixed on a wheeled car. The reciprocating motion of the connecting rod crankshaft combined with the flywheel drives the wheels to rotate, allowing the locomotive to move along the rails. His Royal Highness, this steam locomotive took us half a year. Lin Wentao sighed in his heart. During this time, they researched, produced and assembled day and night. Now this steam locomotive is finally able to move forward along the rails. Although it is not very fast in his opinion, the future potential is definitely huge. Isn't this a big tin can? Fiji glanced sideways. Pang Yukan also nodded. Xiao Ming and Lin Wentao were very excited, but they were confused. In contemporary times, the world's first steam locomotive was invented by the British George Stephenson in 1814. According to the current level of the West, this kind of thing is estimated to appear in 40 to 50 years, but now he is the first person to make a steam locomotive. Although the steam locomotive is still a bit rough and simple, it doesn't matter if it is ugly, as long as it can run. Seeing that many officials were dismissive, Lin Wentao said, this is indeed a big tin can, but it is a big tin that can walk. Then he did not explain, and directly said to the two craftsmen who were responsible for driving steam locomotives on weekdays, now the two of you operate the locomotive and show the emperor. The two nodded and climbed onto the steam locomotive. One of the craftsmen picked up a shovel to add coal to the boiler, while the other craftsman was staring at the steam pressure gauge. When Lin Wentao was developing the steam engine, he had the craftsman make this pressure gauge, and now it can be applied to the steam locomotive. In this way, the locomotive driver can judge the pressure in the boiler and adjust the steam pressure. The rails in the workshop were naturally made by Xiao Ming to Lin Wentao. These rails formed a circle along the wide workshop, so that the locomotive could move in this circle, but these rails also consumed a lot of his steel, which made him very painful. But now that he has a steam locomotive, it's all worth it, because in the next step he can build a railway along the mining area, so that coal and iron ore can be continuously transported to Qingzhou. The steam pressure in the steam locomotive was getting higher and higher. At this time, the craftsman sounded the whistle, and in a hum sound, the steam locomotive moved slowly along the rails. This scene suddenly shocked the officials, and they kept their distance from the steam locomotive, for fear that this steel monster would hurt people. Lin Wentao finally laughed when he saw the embarrassed appearance of these officials. Whoever told these officials to not understand anything would point fingers at the steam locomotive. Hum. The connecting rod of the steam locomotive tilted up and down and moved the wheels through the flywheel and crankshaft. At this time, the heavy wheels finally moved. As the locomotive moves, the speed of the locomotive gradually increases. In the first lap, the locomotive is like a person walking half as slow, and in the second lap, it is like riding a bicycle. On the third lap, it was already galloping like a horse under such a huge power, and officials' faces very exciting. At this moment, they may be truly convinced by technology from their hearts, and they are no longer sages. Xiao Ming brought them here this time to let them witness the real power of science and technology. Otherwise these officials would hold on to the Confucian classics, and they would not pay attention to science and technology. From the bottom of their hearts all he wanted was for them to wake up suddenly when they recalled the steel monster from their midnight dreams. Your Highness, does this steam locomotive work? Lin Wentao said excitedly. Xiao Ming nodded. This locomotive was designed to pursue the maximum power that can be achieved in Qingzhou at present. After all, the efficiency of the steam engine cannot be improved, nor the speed of the locomotive. Now Lin Wentao has only improved the What steam engine to slightly improve the efficiency of the steam engine, so a locomotive of this level can only be compared with the original locomotive, but this is enough for Xiao Ming. Chapter 660 Lu Fei and Number 039, S Surprise Attack. The whistling sound of the whistle was heard in the workshop one after another, but the noise that used to sound to Xiao Ming was now like a fairy tale. The emergence of steam locomotives not only means that Qingzhou's steel level and lathe processing level can produce the spare parts needed for steam locomotives at the same time, this is also the beginning of the barbarians losing the mobility advantage of their horses. As long as he can transport troops quickly, the northern barbarians will no longer be a threat. However, after being excited for a while, Xiao Ming calmed down again. This meal will be eaten one bite at a time. The steam locomotive was developed, but laying the rails requires a lot of steel, and now he can only choose to lay the key roots, and even that is a huge financial burden. Although he has gradually surpassed the West in terms of technology, he is far less wealthy than the wealthy Western countries through plunder. In comparison, he is really poor. For him, building the railway is not a technical problem, but an economic one. After verifying that Lin Wentao's steam locomotive could run, Xiao Ming left with a group of officials. Next, it was time to discuss tightening his belt and repairing the railway at the same time. He is also eager to end the war in the north as soon as possible, so that he can develop with peace of mind. Jiangzhou. After 5 days of marching, Lu Fei and Yi Qingyan had arrived at the city where King Liang lived under the attack of barbarians. These days, they have been moving very slowly to protect the grain road. If they had followed the plan, they should have captured Jiangzhou city by now. However, when they arrived in Jiangzhou, they suddenly found that the city was not as easy to capture as they thought, because Jiangzhou city faces water on one side and mountains on 3 sides. Its location is very dangerous. King Liang's troops and horses have been completely lost. At this time, there must be not many soldiers in the city. If you can suddenly enter the city, you will be able to capture Qingzhou city in one fell swoop. Lu Fei said. Yi Qingyan glanced at the wide river in front of Qingzhou city. This is not Qingzhou. They have no ships to use. It is impossible to attack from the front, and now the barbarians are still harassing. If they can't take Qingzhou city in time, they will definitely lose more soldiers at this time. His eyes swept across the high mountains on both sides of Jiangzhou, and said, these high mountains may not have paths that can be passed through. Why don't we offer a big reward to find a path from the mountains to the city? Well, I have the same intention. Lu Fei replied. Yes. He called a Captain Guo Yi, and said a few words to him, and the Captain Guo Yi led the way. Luo Hong said. At this time, Qingzhou city has only one city wall. If you can find a mountain road, you can directly attack the city, but if there is a mountain road, how can King Lion be unaware and leave a flaw? It's better to try it than to stare at Jiangzhou. Lu Fei said carelessly. Everyone thought it was true. After setting up camp outside the city of Jiangzhou and repairing it overnight, Lu Fei's men arrived the next day with a reward recipient. Lu Fei was overjoyed when he heard the words, and he hurried to the gate of the tent to see the people who came to receive the reward. This is a middle-aged man. At this time, the man is still carrying a bow and arrow. Behind him is a boy of 15 or 16. The boy seems to be a little afraid of people. He hides behind the middle-aged and looks at the soldiers coming and going with timid eyes. The middle-aged man's eyes also contained a trace of unease, and he did not dare to look at Lu Fei directly. Lu Fei had a very forthright temperament. He laughed and said familiarly, this brother, please. The middle-aged man nodded. He looked at the tent surrounded by a strange chariot. His expression was a little hesitant, as if he had something to say to this brother. 100 taels of silver was exactly the amount Lu Fei offered as a reward. The general trotted back to the camp when he heard the words, and returned with 100 taels of silver. The middle-aged man seemed relieved to see these silver coins, and said to Lu Fei, General Z, this is what you deserve. Lu Fei laughed, putting away the 100 taels of silver. The middle-aged man said, General, please come with Kaomin. After saying that, the middle-aged man walked out. Lu Fei thought that he might have to waste a lot of time, so he asked Yi Qingyan to call over 1,000 cavalry, and let 2 soldiers take a middle-aged man and a teenager. and they followed behind. According to the middle-aged man's words, the group went out and went south for about 6 miles and stopped. The middle-aged man got off his horse and pointed to the front and said, "General, this is the trail that Kaoman went up the mountain. You can go up the mountain by following this trail." Lu Fei looked in the direction the middle-aged man was pointing, and in front of him was a winding path hidden in the grass. He and the others immediately dismounted and climbed up the trail. When he reached the top of the mountain, he looked down and saw a straight cliff, 15 meters high. Ye Qingyan frowned and said, "It's too dangerous. If you fall, your life will be lost." Lu Fei felt the same way. This place is not only smooth, but also very narrow, only 30 centimeters wide, and the rock slope and the ground are almost at a 90-degree angle. Most people don't dare to try it. Narrow, steep and slippery. Lu Fei concluded. Hearing the discussion between the two, the middle-aged man was a little nervous, and said, "General, this is the lowest cliff of these 3 mountains, and the other places are 50 paces high. It's no problem to go down from here. Sometimes when hunting, you use a rope to go down from here." The words of the middle-aged man made Lu Fei's mind flash. This rope climbing is one of the subjects of the current Fenghuo army training. If you throw some ropes down from here, you will be able to sneak into Zheongju Castle. Thinking like this, Lu Fei said his thoughts. Ye Qingyan nodded in agreement, sent the soldiers back to the barracks to get ropes. The middle-aged man was also relieved, lest these wolf-like soldiers would regard him as a liar. The soldiers came back soon and brought 7 or 8 thick hemp ropes. According to Lu Fei's method, the soldiers tied the hemp rope to an old tree on the edge of the cliff, and then went down and tied other hemp ropes tied to different trees. This time, we will have a surprise attack. Lu Fei ordered the cavalry to dispatch 20,000 musketeers up the mountain. At this time, he observed the city of Qingzhou through a telescope. As he imagined, there were not many soldiers in the city of Qingzhou. This time, the second prince was killed, the Liang army was destroyed, and other prefectures and counties were captured by the Yang army. Not many troops can be assembled, but 20,000 people are enough, and below them are just a few civilian squares. Their soldiers go down from here, and they can stand on their feet and provide the follow-up soldiers with a chance to enter the city safely. After waiting for a while, 20,000 musketeers reached the top of the mountain, when Lu Fei ordered, "Go down the rope." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 661 Trap. The noon sun was hot and bright, and the soldiers of the Qingzhou army walked down the rope and immediately attracted the attention of the people of Zheongju City. Some of the people ran into the city screaming and started shouting at the same time. After years of training, the Qingzhou army has become proficient at using ropes, and the soldiers descended from the ropes to the ground one by one without gaps in order to succeed in the surprise attack. This time, Lu Fei dispatched the most elite 10,000 Qingzhou army and 10,000 Dengzhou army. These soldiers can be said to have experienced hundreds of battles, and it is not a problem for 20,000 people to win the city of Zheongju. The soldiers who descended to the ground quickly formed an array to guard against the attack of the soldiers from Zheongju, and the following soldiers kept coming down from the mountain. When only 2,000 people gathered on the ground, the sound of rumbling footsteps came, and then the Zheongju army in armor appeared. The Qingzhou army, which had formed a 3-stage firing formation, immediately shot, and the Zheongju army that rushed towards them was caught off guard, and the soldiers in front fell like cutting leeks. It's just that these Qingzhou troops are obviously also elites. Now that these enemies have entered the city, they have received orders from King Liang to fight to the death. If the Qingzhou city is lost, the Liang kingdom will be finished. Bang bang bang. The gunshots continued to sound, and the Zheongju army that rushed over also retreated and rushed and retreated, and as more and more soldiers came up and down the mountain, the resistance of the Zheongju army gradually increased. While the two sides were fighting fiercely, a wolf smoke suddenly appeared in the city, and Lu Fei on the mountain suddenly had an ominous premonition. When he saw the wolf smoke, he picked up the binoculars to search, and suddenly saw a large group of barbarian cavalry coming from the north and south and rushing directly to their camp. Ye Qingyan also saw it, and he said angrily, "This King Liang really has colluded with the barbarians, and now he is ready to die." Lu Fei was worried. "I hope Qi Guanggai and Bai Mu can withstand these cavalry." At this time, Bai Mu and Qi Guanggai also noticed the barbarian cavalry. They looked at each other and said, Bai Mu said, There is no need to worry about the protection of the camp now, but these barbarian cavalry must be eliminated, otherwise they will always be detrimental to our food and grass. This time, we might as well take the initiative to lure them into the trap and catch them by surprise. I have already observed it when we arrived. There is a valley nearby. This valley is very narrow and long, which is suitable for artillery shelling. Cavalry, let's kill these barbarian cavalry together. Are you talking about the valley in the west? Luo said. Qi Guanggai nodded and said, that's right, we need to cheat and lead them to this valley, and then you will cooperate with us to attack. After thinking for a while, Luo Xin gritted his teeth. Said, no problem, I will gather the field guns to deploy in the valley now. Qi Guanggai and Beimu nodded, and then Beimu led a cavalry toward the direction of the barbarian cavalry, while Qi Guanggai and Luo Xin led cavalry and artillery to the valley. This is a long and narrow valley with a length of more than 5 miles and a width of more than 1 mile. After reaching the valley, Luo said, Qi Guanggai, the cavalry will be handed over to you. I will lead the artillery to ambush on both sides of the valley and establish artillery positions. Listen to the time. My signal attack. Okay, I am ambushing with the cavalry on the other side of the mountain. After that, Qi Guanggai led the cavalry to the other side of the valley. More than 20,000 cavalrymen quietly waited for the battle. Seeing Qi Guanggai leave, Luo Xin's eyes searched the valley, trying to find a place that was conducive to artillery shooting. At this time, Beimu led 20,000 cavalry to march towards the barbarian cavalry in neat steps. Fraudulent defeat is also a technical task. It is easy to make the enemy suspicious by pretending not to. Beimu was also very uneasy in his heart, but when he saw the barbarian soldiers, he recalled the hatred of the barbarians when they ravaged Qingzhou. The barbarian soldiers obviously did not expect that Beimu would lead the cavalry to fight against them, and they killed Beimu with a trace of bloodthirsty in their eyes. Beimu led the cavalry and the barbarian cavalry to collide together and started to fight. This unexpected attack caught the barbarians by surprise. They did not expect that the people of Dai would fight against the barbarian cavalry. The head of the flag, this is probably a trap. A barbarian general on a hill not far away looked at the battlefield below. We must fight them, otherwise we can't explain to the Khan. Tangjia was the leader of the barbarian army this time, and this time he was ordered to help King Liang resist the army of King Qi. Although they tried their best to harass the army's food route, they still came to the castle now, so they have been hiding outside Jiangju, waiting for the opportunity. At this time, the beacon fire of King Liang's request for help rose, and they had to attack array. Shiroki ordered, and the 20,000 cavalry quickly adjusted their formation as the barbarian army approached. Shiroki saw a man in front of the hill, who seemed to be a barbarian general. Beimu glanced at the general provocatively, and shouted through gritted teeth. The cavalry immediately rushed towards the barbarian army like a tide. At this time, he was even more jealous when he saw the enemy, but he still remembered that he had already. After discussing the strategy, they rushed into the barbarian army, killed them for a while, and then they turned around and left. The barbarian army has just gained the upper hand. How willing to be reconciled? The horn from the rear sounded. This is the signal of the full attack. Qi Guanggai and Luo Xin have been in ambush in the valley for a long time. Taking advantage of the telescope, Qi Guanggai saw Beimu fleeing towards the valley. He licked his lips. This time they must take care of this group of barbarian cavalry. Enough to suffer. According to the negotiated plan, Beimu rushed into the valley with the cavalry. After confirming that all the barbarian troops had entered the valley, his army suddenly stopped, and then adjusted the formation to face the chasing barbarian army. Put up the horses' ears. Beimu shouted. This was to prevent the horses from being frightened on the hillside. After the barbarian army all entered the valley, Luo Xin asked the army to remove its camouflage, and the muzzles of 100 black field guns aimed at the barbarian cavalry, and the musketeers who protected the artillery also participated in the battle and suddenly appeared on the cliffside. Oops. It's a trick. Tangjia's face was pale just as his thoughts were over. A loud boom suddenly came from the hillside, followed by a constant boom, like a thunder in the sky. Hiss, hiss. Such a loud noise caused the horses sitting on the cavalry to move back and forth uneasy. Some horses even ran uncontrollably, and the cavalry near the side of the valley was even more chaotic. They hadn't seen what was going on. The cavalry was beaten into mud, and the blood splattered all over the place. Chapter 662. Tangjia has lived on the grassland all his life, and he has never seen this terrifying scene. In an instant, his heart was broken, and he had no intention of fighting anymore, but just as they were about to turn around, they saw countless cavalrymen wearing silver breastplates copying over from the back. and the one in the lead held a saber, and plunged into it like a sharp sword. In the army of the barbarians, there were shouts of killing. Baimu looked at the barbarian army that was out of control. He was overjoyed, and rushed to Tengger with his horse and whip. If he killed this man under his horse in this battle, it would be a great credit kill. Qi Guanggai's army attacked, and Baimu's soldiers were also shocked. Qi Guanggai's surprise attack caused the barbarian army to be in chaos in an instant. Standing on the top of the cliff, Luo Xin looked at the battle situation under his feet. Now the barbarian army was attacked from front and back, and the musketeers kept attacking the middle of the team, which made the formation of the barbarian army in chaos. After hearing the sound of the cannon, there was chaos and uncontrollability, and this sudden panic caught the barbarian soldiers by surprise. Now Qi Guanggai and Baimu are completely fighting a group of headless flies. Looking carefully with the binoculars on the mountain, Luo Xin's eyes lit up. In the center of the barbarian army, a figure who looked like a general was directing the army to adjust the formation, and the soldiers around him quickly recovered. It can be seen that this person is in the army. Zheng's prestige is very high. He turned his head and said to an artilleryman beside him, "Order to target the man in silver scale armor and kill him." The person Luo Xin pointed to was Tengger. He could never have imagined that the barbarian army, which had always been invincible, would be ambushed here, and it would be beaten so hard to fight back. He anxiously directed the army to attack Shiroki's army with all his strength, trying to open the gap, because the silver cavalry behind him was slaughtering his soldiers like devils and was completely powerless to resist attack forward. Tengger shouted again, and at the same time there was a loud noise of constant contact. Tengger turned his head to look in the direction of the sound, and saw countless black projectiles coming directly towards him. Tenger's heart almost stopped beating, because the dense shells didn't leave him any space to dodge at all, and the terrifying speed made him unable to dodge in the last moment. Tengger only saw his body rise into the air, and the soldiers beside him were beaten up like him, blood spilled all over the ground, and then he lost consciousness. A salvo killed the barbarian general, and Luo Xin continued to observe the follow-up situation. Sure enough, after the death of the general, the barbarian army began to be out of control. Seeing this opportunity, Luo Xin immediately shouted, "You guys, the general is dead, so let's surrender soon." Hearing Luo Xin's cry, the cavalry in the valley followed and shouted, "Your general is already dead, so hurry up and surrender. The general is dead, surrender quickly." More people shouted, and the voice resounded through the valley. Hearing the sound, none of the barbarian cavalry surrendered, but these tens of thousands of people had lost their organization and were no match for the well-trained King's Hao cavalry. Under the shelling and attack from both sides, they quickly defeated the barbarian cavalry. The sound of the cannon stopped, and the battle lasted for 3 full hours. From noon to evening, the barbarian cavalry was almost completely wiped out. His body was already stained red with blood, and Baimu got off his horse with a saber. He said, "I don't know what happened to General Lu. Let's go back and see, maybe they have already captured Jiangzhou City." Nodding their heads, Qi Guanggai and Luo Xin ordered their troops and rushed towards Jiangzhou City. Jiangzhou City was already in chaos at this time. Lu Fei and Yi Qingyan did not stop after gaining the upper hand. Instead, they attacked the South City Gate all the way. They had to put down the bridge in front of the city gate. Only foreign troops can enter the city. It's just that the more they went to the South Gate, the greater the resistance they encountered. Now they have figured out that this army is not the King's Hao army, but the royal guard of Liang King. It's just that although these guards were not afraid of death, they were still in retreat under the muzzle of the muskets at this time. Lu Fei immediately asked the soldiers to put down the city gate. King Liang of the royal guards jumped into thunder while watching all this, and his most elite guardsmen had not even been able to get close to this army. Just when he was angry, after the wooden bridge was put down, some soldiers immediately carried strange weapons into the city. Before he could react, a huge explosion sounded. Suddenly boom and rumble, and then he saw the soldiers in the army splashing blood in the blue smoke on the city wall. Lu Fei looked at King Liang's army, which was being bombarded. He had to say that the Imperial Guard was still a bit fierce, but it was a pity that they encountered the King's Hao army. Your Qingyan, you took 5,000 people around and cut off their retreat. King Liang seems to be in the army, so he can't be allowed to run away. Lu Fei ordered. After receiving the order, your Qingyan nodded. He led the army around the battlefield and moved quickly to the rear of King Liang. At this time, King Liang and the Imperial Guard had already been bombarded by the blooming bombs. At this moment, Yi Qingyan, who was behind, led the soldiers to launch an attack. Bang bang. The dense gunshots sounded. More King Liang's soldiers fell into a pool of blood before they could react to what was going on, and King Liang was already frightened, and the whole person froze in place. His Royal Highness, let's go, it will be too late if you don't go. A general rushed to King Liang, and his face was covered in blood. What's going on? What's going on? King Liang murmured nervously to himself. In his eyes, the soldiers fell one by one, and he couldn't see the enemy at all. The screams and shattered flesh around him made him feel like he was in hell. When the general saw King Liang like this, he couldn't care less. He dragged him and ran to the east. At this time, King Liang's army had no rules and regulations, and everyone was scared and lost by the strange way of death. Like the soul move forward, shoot freely. The previous attack had already cost Liang Wang's army most of the loss, and Lu Fei seized the time to let the soldiers start to attack. Following his orders, the soldiers rushed out screaming. At this moment, King Liang's soldiers realized that they had no hope of winning, and this made them even more fearful. But just as the general led King Liang to flee, the roar of the hooves sounded, and Bai Mu and Qi Guanggai led the cavalry quickly into the city of Zhilongzhi. They have been waiting for the day to take Zhilongzhi for a long time, and now they will not allow King Liang to escape again. There were wolves in front and tigers in the back. King Liang and his generals immediately realized that there was nowhere to run. Chapter 663. The gunfire gradually faded, and the battle in Zhilongzhi Castle was drawing to a close. The suspension bridge fell, and the remaining artillery and musketeers poured into the city along the suspension bridge. Seeing that more and more King Qi soldiers appeared, the morale of King Liang's army in Zhilongzhi Castle was getting lower and lower. King Liang, don't surrender quickly. Lu Fei and Qi Guanggai surrounded King Liang and his 300 imperial guards. Among the guards, King Liang wore a royal robe that was particularly eye-catching. Qi Guanggai recognized him at a glance, and after discovering King Liang, he immediately led cavalry to surround King Liang and his followers. King Liang glanced at Lu Fei lightly, but he did not return, but instead asked, "How is King Yan? How is the second prince?" "King Yan is dead, so is the second prince." Lu Fei's tone was like the frost in winter. At this moment, King Liang seemed to be a few years old. He had no children under his knees, and he always treated the second prince as his own son. Now the person who can inherit his great lineage is dead, and the king of Yan who can fight Qi with him is also dead, and now he seems to have nothing left. Winning the king and defeating the bandit, is this the destiny? After all, this country still belongs to the Zhao family. King Liang said sullenly. After a pause, he said to Lu Fei, "It's enough to kill the king alone. I hope the general will not implicate innocent people." King Liang knew that he would die without a doubt, and Xiaoming became emperor, and they were rebels who rebelled. With a light snort, Lu Fei said, "Whether they are innocent or not, this general will care about himself, so don't bother King Liang." No matter how pitiful King Liang looks now, he will not sympathize. If it wasn't for King Liang and King Yan pushing the three kings to attack Qi, how could he have lost so many soldiers in the Battle of Yunzhao? So when he thinks of this, he can't wait to kill King Liang. This hypocritical person is just a villain. Collusion with the barbarians first, then rebellion. Why should such a traitor be merciful? There was a flash of anger in King Liang's eyes at this time. If it was before, how could Lu Fei be worthy of shouting in front of him, "Take them all"? Before waiting for Liang Wang and others to react, Lu Fei ordered the soldiers who surrounded King Liang immediately contracted the encirclement with bayonets. Some of King Liang's guards immediately protected King Liang in the middle, while other guards rushed to Lu Fei, and the corpse broke through and fled from here. Lu Fei sneered. King Liang pitied his guards just now, but deliberately said so to let these guards fight him out of the city. It's just that King Liang obviously made a mistake. Now the soldiers of Zhilongzhi in the city are either killed or surrendered. Even if he breaks out of the encirclement, he will not be able to get help from other soldiers. What's more, these 300 people can't protect him at all. Shoot. Lu Fei said lightly, looking at King Liang who was hiding in the guard. Bang bang bang. The musket emitted smoke and fire, and the guards of King Liang who rushed over fell one after another. The soldiers in front of him fell one by one, and King Liang finally showed a look of fear, but Lu Fei didn't seem to want the soldiers to stop. When only King Liang was left in the encirclement, Lu Fei ordered another shot. Bang bang bang. The musket shot, and the projectile burst into a cloud of blood on King Liang's body. Blood spat out from his mouth, and King Liang fell down in disbelief. He didn't believe that Xiaoming would condone a general and kill him. It's just that he forgot that the second prince died in the hands of this army, not to mention that he was a king of Liang general. This King Liang is dead. Will the emperor blame him? Luo Hong was a little worried. After all, this King Liang was a vassal king. If King Liang was executed so simply, he was afraid of being impeached by officials in the court. The emperor is too lazy to deal with King Liang. I would have killed him for the emperor. The emperor would only be happy, Lu Fei knew Xiao Ming's temperament very well. Xiao Ming has never had any favorable impression of these feudal kings with different surnames. After killing King Liang, there are still many things left, and the most important thing is to occupy Zhuangguan. This Zhuang Pass is the gateway for the barbarians to pass through the Liang kingdom. If it is not captured in time, the barbarians can drive straight in. When he set off this time, Xiao Ming specially explained this. After thinking about it for a while, Lu Fei said to Qi Guanggai and Beimu, King's Hao City is broken, Liang Guo's generals are leaderless, and Zhuangguan's generals are likely to join the barbarians. The two of you will immediately lead the cavalry to Zhuangguan, and Luo Xin and Luo Hong will lead a support team. You captured Zhuangguan? Yes, General. Qi Guanggai and Beimu said at the same time that Lu Fei's military rank was higher than them in the West expedition. After giving this order, Lu Fei said to King Guyan, although King Liang is dead, there are still some wealthy families in the two countries who support King Liang. These wealthy families must be cut off. King Guyan nodded. This was what they had to do every time they conquered a city, because it was only by getting rid of these powerful families who were loyal to King Liang and supporting those who were loyal to Xiao Ming that the place would settle down. After explaining these things, Lu Fei sent someone to pass the news of the capture of King's Hao City back to King Zhao, and then he looked in the direction of Chang'an, which is now occupied by King Zhao. Now that the kingdoms of Wei, Yan, and Liang have all been settled, there is only one king of Zhao left in the north. If King Zhao is taken down again, this northern convenience will be unified. Since then, they have been able to deal with the northern barbarians wholeheartedly. In the hearts of the King Zhao generals, the real enemy of the Great Yu Kingdom has always been the northern barbarians. This country is strong and powerful, the people of the country are on horses as soldiers, and the nation is cruel by nature. If the barbarians are not destroyed, the Great Yu Kingdom will be threatened by this nation. Once the Great Yu Kingdom falls into decline, the barbarians will take the opportunity to enter the Central Plains, and this is something they do not want to see. In fact, during this period of time, they had been worried that the barbarians would take the opportunity to attack the north, but according to Xiao Ming, the barbarians seemed to have their own troubles and had no time to go south. It's just that this is not the reason for them to relax their vigilance. Taking this opportunity, they should control the northern gates and keep the barbarians outside the country. After all, the northern part of the Great Yu Kingdom has been in war for more than a year, people have been displaced, and farming has suffered heavy losses. They need a period of time to recuperate. After all, the years of war have put a huge financial pressure on King Zhao, and it is difficult to deal with the barbarians with only the financial resources of King Zhao. While he was thinking about it, a cavalryman wearing Liang Zhen's armor outside King Zhao City quickly headed north. The direction he went to was Zhuangguan. Now that Jiangzhou has fallen, he must pass the news to Zhang Chengwen, the guardian of Zhuang, who is the third brother of King Liang. Because of this, King Liang handed over this important pass to him. King Zhao City was only 200 miles away from Zhuangguan Pass. 2 days later, the cavalry arrived at Zhuangguan Pass, and he immediately informed Zhang Chengwen of the news. King Zhao City is lost. Zhang Chengwen said in shock, turning his eyes and saying, I must go to Washugu Taiji now. Only the Golden Horde can save Liang Kingdom. P.S. Staying up all night with code words has exhausted the body. Low-grade fever, uncomfortable. I have no energy today. Try to 3 chapters at night. I can't survive until 2 chapters. Sorry, I will make it up at 5 tomorrow. Chapter 664. Dumbfounded Zhang Chengwen. Jiangzhou Castle fell. Wu Zhiyu frowned tightly. In the silver account 3 days ago, Zhang Chengwen took a team of cavalry out from Zhuangguan and came straight to the silver account of the Golden Horde. He needed to tell Wu Shugu the news. At that time, King Liang sent an envoy to the capital of the Golden Horde. As one of the envoys, he and Wu Shugu had some interactions. At that time, the news is absolutely true. In Yunzhou City, King Qi's army defeated the coalition of the 3 kings, and then they entered the country of Liang like a broken bamboo. Zhang Chengwen's eyes wandered. Wu Shugu squinted at Zhang Chengwen. He snorted and said, if that's the case, why didn't you tell me the news earlier? I'm afraid you have a ghost in your heart and want to replace King Liang. Zhang Chengwen was caught up in Wu Shugu's words, and he was stunned for a moment. He was about to defend himself when Wu Shugu suddenly said, you don't have to explain. It doesn't matter who the king of Liang is to our Golden Horde, but it's enough to be obedient. Zhang Chengwen was overjoyed when he heard the words. He said, Taiji, King Liang has always been obedient to Taiji, but I have a sincere heart for Taiji. Wu Shugu nodded slightly, and he said, this King Qi seems to be a serious trouble for my Golden Horde's confidant. If it wasn't for the Japanese attacking Guerrilla at this time, it would have been destroyed with all the power of the whole country, Jiang Chengwen said. Taiji said very much, but now that King Qi's army is not stable, it is too late. Wu Shugu frowned. It's just that Father Khan doesn't want to fight on two fronts. Even if you support you can only send 30,000 cavalry and 70,000 slave soldiers. Only when the war in Guerrilla is over can we concentrate on dealing with King Qi. Taiji, it's just that at that time, I'm afraid that King Qi will also destroy King Zhao, and no one will be able to help Taiji. Jiang Chengwen was a little anxious when he came this time. He thought that the Golden Horde would be able to send troops to help him retake the city of Liang, so that he would be the king of Liang after all. Now that the city of King Zhao has been broken, the life and death of King Liang is unknown, and the second prince died in battle. In this Liang land, he is the only one left to inherit the throne. What you said makes sense, but Taiji has nothing to do now, and the troubles of the Japanese state are just around the corner. This is a provocation to the Khanate. Father Khan is furious, but at this time, he can't care about King Qi, and these soldiers are also what Father Khan prepared for you and King Zhao. There is really nothing else left. Wu Shugu said. Jiang Chengwen was extremely disappointed. At most, these soldiers were enough for him to defend Zhuangguan. Seemingly seeing Jiang Chengwen's thoughts, Wu Shugu said, these troops are for you to guard Zhuangguan. When the war in Guerrilla is over, I promise to lead the army to destroy King Qi. Jiang Chengwen sighed in his heart, and that's all he can do now. He said, I only hope that Taiji can lead his troops to come soon. Wu Shugu nodded. Jiang Chengwen didn't dare to stay any longer, and after saying goodbye to Wu Shugu, he hurried back to Zhuang Pass, but when he arrived in front of the pass with the troops supported by the barbarians, he immediately died for examination and approval. At this time, Zhuangguan was still a soldier of the Liang kingdom. It was clearly the army of King Qi in green uniforms. It was only 6 or 7 days that Zhuangguan had changed hands. Give me back Zhuangguan. Jiang Chengwen scolded. He did not expect King Qi's army to take Zhuangguan so quickly. However, the only answer to him was the roar of artillery. At the same time, Niu Ben also arrived at Zhuangguan. He was ordered to come to supervise the battle, and he never thought that he had just arrived in King Zhao and learned that King Liang had been captured, and then he hurried to Zhuangguan because Lu Fei immediately led his army to attack here. Entering Zhuangguan, Niu Ben immediately felt a pre-war tense atmosphere. The people in and out of Zhuangguan were all in a hurry, with worried expressions on their faces. There was not a single merchant on the street. The alley appears the general's chariots and horses are exhausted. You must be tired, let's go to the camp first. Lu Fei said with a tired look on Niu Ben's face. Niu Ben shook his head and said, no, the battle is urgent. How many barbarian soldiers have come from outside the city? General Wei, according to the identification of the soldiers in the city, this person is Jiang Chengwen, the guard of Zhuang Pass. This time, he is estimated to have brought soldiers and horses borrowed from the barbarians. The number is about 100,000, including 30,000 cavalry and 70,000 slave soldiers. Zhuangguan is the northwest gateway of the Great Yu Kingdom. Between the territory of Liang Kingdom and the Golden Horde, there are many mountains around Zhuangguan, especially on the side adjacent to the Plateau of the Throat. The construction of Zhuangguan is also based on its military characteristics. It sits in the south and faces the north. The north wall is thick and high. During the conversation, the two arrived at Zicheng. There were obviously more soldiers here, and they were very busy. They were constantly traveling, carrying ammunition and carrying stones. Soldiers abound. Ye Qingyan said at this time, it is thanks to the Yang army that we can successfully take Zhuangguan this time. Chen Xinren also led the troops to take down the last city of Liang Kingdom with us. Hearing this, Niu Ben showed an expression of admiration, and he said, I didn't expect that King Yang would have a valiant general. This Chen Xinren is a talent. Lu Fei did not deny it. The three of them arrived at the main camp, and in front of them was the city wall. The city wall of Zhuangguan is not high, only about 12 meters. It is made of bluestone, but it looks very strong. Walking up the 2-meter wide stairs to the city tower, Niu Ben's field of vision suddenly appeared. Green grassland not far from the pass are the free barbarian cavalry and barbarian slave soldiers. Picking up the binoculars and looking at the barbarian soldiers not far away, Niu Ben observed for a while and said in deep thought, don't worry, these are not the elites of the barbarians. The emperor really has a clever plan. The barbarians are not willing to fight on two fronts now, so the cavalry they sent are not elites. Lu Fei and Ye Qingyan also breathed a sigh of relief. He said, General, the soldiers have been fighting hard for several months, and now they are extremely tired. It is time for the soldiers to repair for a while. Niu Ben understood what Lu Fei meant. The problem brought about by continuous hard fighting was the soldiers' war weariness, which needed to be vented through grooming and relaxation. After pondering for a while, he said to Lu Fei, "Go and collect the Yanshan women from Liang State, pay them some money, and let them sing a song for the soldiers, but don't force them, so as not to corrupt the emperor's reputation." Lu Fei suddenly kept his eyes open. Not to mention the soldiers, he also felt that he was in an irritable mood during this time. This was all caused by the depression of the war. It was naturally wonderful to have this pleasure, so he was naturally happy to carry out this matter, so he smiled and said, "General, do you want to pick a top card for you? Go away." Niu Ben glared angrily, "I'm not going to ask people to find someone for something under the bed. If you come here, let's see how I'm going to deal with you." Chapter 665, The Fetters of Sovereign Power. The gust of wind on the grassland continued to blow, and the slight chill heralded the coming of the next cold winter. Niu Ben was naturally aware of the thoughts of Lu Fei and other generals, and this time he came to solve this matter as a veteran of the great Yu Kingdom. He is very aware that soldiers will violate various laws in war, and this situation will have a very bad impact on the occupied cities. There has been an increase in cases of soldiers bullying local women from good families in the battle reports delivered to him over the years. For this matter, he originally held an indifferent attitude, because in his opinion, there was no large-scale rape and looting in the army. The scene of rape and looting is enough to prove that this is a well-disciplined army, and the mistakes made by a few soldiers are irrelevant. It's just that when the battle report was delivered to Xiao Ming was very worried about it, so he got Lao Zhen's order this time. On the one hand, he came to supervise the war, and on the other hand, he came to work for the army. After defeating the allied forces of the Three Kings, Lu Fei and his generals led the soldiers to fight continuously, and the battle from city to city was extremely difficult. Now that Zhuangguan has been won, the war in Liang Kingdom has finally ended, but the war is far from over. Chang'an City is still in the hands of King Zhao, and there are many battles to come. Moreover, the Liang State itself borders the Zhao State, and if the Liang State is destroyed, the King of Zhao will definitely prevent them from continuing westward. For this kind of long-term war, soldiers who are facing life and death can easily lose control and violate military discipline. At first, he seemed to understand something about Lao Zhen, but after Xiao Ming explained it, he suddenly realized according to Xiao Ming, what soldiers need is not only the monthly salaries, but they need more honor and national recognition for their reckless killing of the enemy. This labor force seems to be an optional thing, but when it is actually implemented, it will bring unexpected results to the army, and even appease the dissatisfaction of soldiers due to their boring life. To put it simply, it is to let the soldiers know that the country has not forgotten them when they are fighting on the front line, and they also fully recognize their contribution to the country. Thinking of this, there was a smile in Niu Ben's eyes. He had never heard of such a theory, but he had to say that Xiao Ming's words came into his heart. After this war, not only the labor union will become one of the regular programs of the army, but also more decrees will be issued for the status of soldiers. Although he was scolded by Xiao Ming in the courtroom for delaying the war, he was very happy on the way here this time because he could see that Xiao Ming intended to improve the status of the army, and this was an unprecedented event in the great Yu Kingdom. The previous emperors all paid more attention to civility than military. The repeated failures of the barbarian wars and the decrees that made the army dissatisfied have always made the generals dissatisfied, which is one of the reasons why the generals are unwilling to give their lives. Lu Fei was scolded, but still smiling, he said to Niu Ben, "General, I am really grateful for being sympathetic to the soldiers. It's just that the emperor won't know about it. This matter is the emperor's order." Niu Ben did not hide it. "If you want to be grateful, thank the emperor." Lu Fei's eyes widened. He couldn't believe it. The emperor has always been strict with the army. How can you explain this time? The emperor is indeed very strict in governing the army, but the emperor has been talking about you all the time, saying that you are fighting hard outside. The soldiers have sacrificed a lot, and they are facing death at any time, saying that he can't go to the battlefield in person and can only find a way to relieve the soldiers. Niu Ben repeated Xiao Ming's words. When Niu Ben heard the words, his heart became hot and his eyes were red. These days, from King Zhao to Yun Zhao, from Yun Zhao to King Zhao, they fought all the way and felt that they were fighting in addition to fighting, and they gradually became numb every day, like a scarecrow. And Niu Ben's words suddenly made them feel that no matter how much suffering they suffered, it was worth it. Okay, let's do it quickly, while the war is temporarily suspended. Lu Fei's expression made Niu Ben more and more agree with what Xiaoming said. Just this simple order made a man like Lu Fei so moved. Yes, General. Niu Ben laughed and ran down immediately. Yu Qingyan and other generals were also delighted. The days of marching and fighting were very boring. If it weren't for the long history of the army to strictly control the discipline of the army, they really wanted to indulge the soldiers to loot, and now, this good thing suddenly made them lose their thoughts while they were talking. The barbarian cavalry and slave soldiers outside Zhuangguan suddenly turned around and evacuated to the depths of the grassland. All this made the generals heave a sigh of relief. The barbarians were not ready to attack the city. General, the barbarians have retreated, and Zhang Chengwen estimates that he knows he can't capture Zhuangguan. Yu Qingyan said. Niu Ben nodded, and he said, that's good. If the barbarians attack in large numbers at this time, it will be troublesome. So we take advantage of the time when the barbarians and the Japanese are at war with each other to capture Chang'an in one fell swoop and destroy the king of Zhao. Luo Hong and Luo Xin looked at each other. Chang'an was their hometown, and they most eagerly hoped to attack the generals of Chang'an, because they still had some relatives in Chang'an city. After reminding the generals of the next battle, Niu Ben instructed the generals guarding the city not to relax, so he and the generals went down the city wall together. King's How the excitement brought by the steam locomotive lasted only 3 days, and on the morning of the 4th day, he was provoked by the officials. What annoyed him this time was precisely the question of the status of the army. Your Majesty, the generals of all dynasties are in great positions. Is it still rare to have troops to rebel against the imperial court? In the view of the lower official, the status of the army is now much higher than before, and King Zhao has also set up the Hall of Heroes for the soldiers who died in battle. At this time, why increase the rights that soldiers have in the government hall? Fiji said loudly. This minister seconded the proposal. Pang Yukan also stood up at this time. This time, the decree proposed by Xiaoming made the civil servants a little dissatisfied. My minister agrees. My minister agrees. After Fiji and Pang Yukan, one after another civil servants stood up. Yuming, Zhao Jun and other officials also stood up. Looking at the officials who stood up one by one, Xiaoming frowned. It was really rare for Pang Yukan and Fiji to urinate in the same pot. This time it can be seen to what extent the great Yu state has placed emphasis on literature over martial arts. These officials finally couldn't sit still when they saw Xiaoming's continuous improvement in the status of soldiers. Are you forcing me? Xiaoming frowned. During this time, he was determined to let these officials use their talents to help him manage the ruined great Yu kingdom. Therefore, in order not to discourage their enthusiasm, he also took some irrelevant suggestions. It was just at this moment that he suddenly realized a problem. Since ancient times, there has been a natural conflict between the monarchy and the bureaucracy, because strengthening the imperial power will inevitably damage the interests of the bureaucracy. During this period of time, he behaved too well, and these officials seemed to have the illusion that he was another Xiao Wangxuan. Chapter 666. P.S. There's more below, maybe a little later. I don't dare to wait. I just want the emperor to think twice. Now the musket team is extremely powerful. If a general has a different heart, this will be a great threat to the emperor. Fiji said aloud. Pang Yukan was also a little worried. He said, Your Majesty, if you continue to improve the status of the army, I'm afraid that the general will become more arrogant, and the arrogance in your heart will despise the imperial powers. Xiaoming naturally understood the words of the two. This was the ill of the feudal army. After all, the army in this era was only the personal soldiers of the generals. It's just that what these officials can't see through is that they are turning the army into a royal family. In the future, he can completely punish the generals and the army will not act rashly. Moreover, these two people are obviously avoiding the important ones. The decree they put forward is to improve the status of the soldiers and let the soldiers enjoy more convenience among the people. This kind of convenience is similar to the fact that the window of a modern station has a special channel for military personnel, and military personnel enjoy preferential policies such as employment. After pondering for a while, he said directly, I'm afraid you have misunderstood what I mean. The decree this time is definitely not to encourage the arrogance of the generals, but to allow more ordinary soldiers to feel the court's arrogance towards them. Be considerate, let them understand that they are fighting abroad, and the imperial court is thinking of them, so that the common people can actively join the army to expand the territory of the imperial court, and defend against foreign enemies for the great Yu kingdom. Fiji and Pang Yukan looked at each other, and he said, Your Majesty, it is enough for the soldiers to have their daily salaries. The lower officials thought that even without these soldiers, they would still be able to fight for the court, and they had given them so much convenience. What do you think? Did they do their part for the emperor? Speaking of scholars, peasants, industry and commerce, Xiao Ming chuckled. Today's Western countries seem to have entered the modern state model, and the Great Yu country is still strictly hierarchical, which will seriously limit the vitality of the development of the Great Yu country, he said. Old Feijia mentioned the scholar, peasant, business, and industry, but I remembered it. I decided to abolish the title of scholar, peasant, business, and industry. From then on, the people of all classes of the scholar, peasant, business, and industry in the Great Yu Kingdom are all called commoners, civilians. Feijia was shocked. He said, "What are civilians? The people under the rule are of equal status, and they are civilians." Xiao Ming said lightly. He expected the shock of Feijia and others since ancient times. Scholars, peasants, businessmen, and commerce have been the solidified class of all dynasties. The status of scholars is the highest, so there are all kinds of inferior goods, only reading is high, and the status of businessmen is the lowest, so business was suppressed in the feudal dynasties, of course. Xiao Ming does not deny that this kind of system of 3, 6 and 9 is very beneficial to the development of feudal dynasties. After all, the feudal dynasties based on agriculture need food instead of deceitful and cunning businessmen who do not do production, but times are changing. For him, many systems in the Great Yu Kingdom are no longer suitable to compete with the Western state systems of this era. Maybe he can defeat Western countries with the advantages of technology, but the backward feudal system will eventually drag him down to unify the country of Great Yu. How can this be? How can these despicable businessmen be on an equal footing with scholars? Yes, scholars, peasants, industry and commerce are the ancestors' family traditions that have been handed down. How can you say that they will change, your majesty? It is absolutely impossible. As soon as Xiao Ming's words fell, the court immediately exploded, especially the officials from Chang'an who were like dead parents. Although Pang Yukan and other reformist officials were dissatisfied, they were more comfortable with Xiao Ming's strange ideas, but even so, they now have some ideas. In the past, Xiao Ming only promoted the status of merchants and craftsmen, but now Xiao Ming directly denied the status of scholars. Xiao Ming was indifferent to the chaos in the government hall. These two things are the two things he wants to promote next. Before talking about these two things, he had expected to encounter fierce opposition, so at this time he understood that it could not be done overnight, and I am afraid that it would take some time with these officials. Now there is only one king of Zhao in the north to achieve reunification, and he implemented these two policies at this time to prepare for the development after reunification. The purpose of raising the status of the soldiers is to make the Great Yu country form a kind of martial style. Too much literary style is a disadvantage of the feudal dynasty, and he must bring this disadvantage back. The abolition of the four classes of scholars, peasants, businessmen, and industry is for balanced development, so that being an official is no longer the only way out for scholars. So for Xiao Ming, these two things are very important. Only after the contemporary Qin dynasty and the Japanese state were knocked on the door by Western artillery, did they passively change and learn from the West because of suffering and facing the danger of national subjugation. At this time, everyone from the royal family to the common people realized that they needed to change. But now the Great Yu Kingdom has not been invaded by Western advanced civilization. At this time, neither officials nor common people can take the initiative to participate in the change. This kind of change can only be carried out on his own initiative, which is why he is the emperor. Only when he has mastered the supreme imperial power can he implement reforms. Otherwise those who demand reforms will die without a place to hide. After all, when he issued such a decree with the prestige of the emperor, he encountered the opposition of so many officials. However, the response of the officials made Xiao Ming more and more determined to reform. He has been analyzing the current situation of the Great Yu Kingdom these days. Generally speaking, it is still a stage where the scholar official class is not lonely, and the civilian class is not yet strong, so his implementation of this decree will be collectively opposed, because he has touched the interests of these scholar official classes. Shut up for me. Xiao Ming suddenly scolded the Palace of Political Affairs as if it had become a vegetable market. The angry words suddenly made the hall quiet. At this time, Xiao Ming stood up and said aloud, "Do you think I don't know what you are thinking? Going to the sky? You are not doing it for yourself. There is a day in the year when you will be an extremely noble official. You are not reconciled. Why are these businessmen full of copper and ugly? Farming mudlegs can be on an equal footing with you, right?" Xiao Ming walked from the dragon chair to Feijia and other officials as he spoke. "It's just that you don't think about it. Without the money and efforts of these merchants, this Yaozhao, this Jinling city can be conquered so smoothly. Without the people joining the army, how can I fight King Zhao? The great Yu kingdom used to be bad. What it is like, you forget. Don't you want me to follow the old path of the previous emperor? Turning to Pang Yukin, Xiao Ming pointed at Pang Yukin and scolded, Pang Xiaofu, you have been studying for so long in Bowen College for nothing, and you have returned them all to me. Do you still have any enterprising spirit from before? Pang Yukin bowed his head in shame. Now that the war is going well, and seeing the unification of the North, many officials began to think about their status and interests, and forgot to be proactive in difficult times. Being scolded by Xiao Ming, he felt like he was being beaten in the head. Chapter 667 Never Compromise. There was silence in the government hall. Xiao Ming said angrily. The officials looked at each other in dismay, and the reformists led by Pang Yukin were naturally embarrassed. Just when Xiao Ming thought his words could scold these officials, he saw a dozen officials from Fiji kneeling down. Your Majesty, such decrees and ministers have never heard of it. If it is implemented, it will inevitably cause dissatisfaction among scholars all over the world. I hope the emperor will take it back. Yu Ming said in a hurry. Please take back your order. The other ministers agreed in unison. Xiao Ming laughed angrily when he saw this. He didn't expect that. He used to see scenes in TV dramas that appeared in front of him this time. Are these ministers going to blackmail themselves by not being able to kneel? What if I insist on pushing it? Xiao Ming said coldly. Yu Ming said, if the emperor does not take back his order, the ministers will always kneel. Xiao Ming glanced at Fiji at this time. Yu Ming and Zhao Jun were both people he had recommended to him, because these two were known as virtuous officials among Chang'an officials at that time. These two officials were really useful to him. After all, they were rare and honest officials, but now the problem is coming. Often the virtuous officials of the great Yu kingdom used to oppose his decrees more and more fiercely. Xiao Ming pondered a little about this question and then understood. In his opinion, these people are like the three good students of the contemporary age. They are too respectful of teachers and respect the Tao, to the point of being pedantic. Therefore, in their opinion, some of Xiao Ming's decrees are deviant. If Xiao Ming is not the emperor, it is estimated that their saliva can spray Xiao Ming to death. It was the first time in such a long time that Xiao Ming and the officials had such a fierce confrontation. At this time, Xiao Ming understood that this was actually a struggle between the monarchy and the bureaucracy. If he loses this time, these officials will intensify their restrictions on their rights in the future, and they will definitely obstruct things that are not pleasing to the eye. Thinking of this, Xiao Ming strengthened his determination more and more, and he said to Yu Ming, since you like to kneel, then keep kneeling. After all, he went straight out of the council hall, ignoring these officials. Seeing Xiao Ming leaving, Jin Dafu immediately shouted retreat, and when he passed by Yu Ming, he gave a yin and yang hun. The officials watched Xiao Ming disappear. At this time, Pang Yukin said to Yu Ming, Yu Shangshu, stop kneeling. I think the emperor is determined this time. It's useless for you to kneel to death. Fiji sighed and said to Pang Yukin, Pang Xiaofu, did the emperor have this temper before? Pang Yukin recalled and said, the emperor's temper is much better now. If he had previously ordered his decrees, no one would dare to disobey. Fiji nodded. Ever since Xiao Ming followed his advice about the wealthy family in marrying Quizuir, he suddenly felt that he had returned to the days of getting along with Xiao Wangsun. At that time, Xiao Wangsun basically listened to his advice. This familiar feeling made him think that Xiao Ming and Xiao Wangsun still have something in common. But what happened this morning made him finally see another side of Xiao Ming. Unlike Xiao Ming, who is usually kind, he just saw the power of an emperor from Xiao Ming. Yu Shangshu, don't kneel. Get up, the emperor is gone. Fiji also persuaded, although he also opposed Xiao Ming's decree, but Shimu's instincts prevented him from pushing himself into debt. And Yu Ming has always been famous in Chang'an for not giving any face to anyone, whether it is a traitor or a worthy one. He is not afraid, and only does things according to his original intention. If the emperor does not take back his order, the lower officials will always kneel in this government hall. Yu Ming looked like he was ready to fight to the end. Fiji and Pang Yukin looked at each other a little helplessly. He said, why is this? We and the emperor will spend it slowly. Maybe the emperor is just a whim, and it's time to make up my mind in a few days. Yu Ming shook his head, but ignored it. He said, I'm afraid that the emperor's decrees will mess up the people's hearts. If there are no scholars, farmers, businessmen, who still study as officials, and who still work hard, it's better to be the merchants and pawns. Pang Yukin said, Yu Shangshu's words are somewhat reasonable, but under the emperor's scolding, the lower officials suddenly felt that the emperor also had his own reasons. Before that, the decrees of the vassal state were made by the emperor, but now the vassal state has become strong. If this is not the case, I am afraid that there will be no King Zhao and no government hall. Pang Xiaofu's words are wrong. In the past, the emperor was only the king of Qi, so naturally he only cared about Kitty, but now the emperor is the lord of the great Yu kingdom and must be concerned about the people in other places. What you can do in King Zhao may not work in other places. It works, Fiji said. Pang Yukan said, could it be possible to do it before Kitty? It's just a matter of human effort. After that, he shook his head and turned to leave the Hall of State Affairs. The reason for his opposition this time is that the introduction of these two policies will lower the status of civil servants in the court. Just throwing this aside, these two policies are extremely beneficial to the great Yu kingdom, and he is also temporarily obsessed in the courtroom. Thinking of this, he felt even more ashamed, because at some point he began to consider his own interests, which he hadn't had before. Gritting his teeth, he sighed, feeling that he had changed back to reflect while the officials were still making a fuss in the council hall. Xiao Ming had already returned to Xingyun under the protection of the Imperial Guards. Dafu, you stare at the Hall of State Council for me, and tell me if you have anything. Xiao Ming ordered. Jin Dafu nodded. This Yu Ming is a stubborn one, and I can't say that he will really keep kneeling down. Xiao Ming has a big head. He needs some honest officials, but sometimes honest officials are double-edged swords. If he likes to kneel, let him kneel for a few days. I will never compromise on this matter. Xiao Ming snorted coldly. Jin Dafu nodded. What the emperor said is very true. These officials are simply going against the sky. If the emperor listened to them this time, I don't know how many things will happen in the future. The old slave will send someone to watch it now. After speaking, Jin Dafu turned around and left. Watching Jin Dafu leave, Xiao Ming frowned. He was not afraid of these civil servants, because the truth of later generations told him that the barrel of a gun would govern. So his focus had always been the military. Thinking of this, he didn't know whether Niu Ben had captured Jiangju, and whether he had gone to the army as he said. While he was thinking about these things, Niu Ben and a group of generals were discussing an imminent battle. Lu Fei, who was about to find the female Lao Zhen in the brothel, suddenly received a secret message, which told them that King Zhao's troops were advancing towards Zhuangguan. After watching silently for so long, King Zhao finally stepped forward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 668. The First Confrontation. Jiayiren. In the Zhuangguan camp, Niu Ben was holding a letter in his hand. This was the secret letter that Lu Fei had just received when he was about to leave the city. A sneaky servant outside the city aroused his vigilance, because he suspected that this person was a meticulous work. He immediately sent someone to take this person down. Unexpectedly, this servant handed a secret letter to him, saying that they were sent by Jiayiren General. Who is this Jiayiren? Niu Ben didn't know anything about the officials in Chang'an. Niu Ben put the secret letter on the candle and burned it to ashes. At this time, he said, this Jiayiren is from the Jie family in Chang'an. It is said that he has some personal friends with Mr. Fiji, and once served as Zuopush in the court. Zuopush? Lu Fei sighed. This is a first-rank officer. A high-ranking minister. Luo Hong was a general in Chang'an and was naturally familiar with Jiayiren. He said, this Jiayiren is very familiar with the wind and the rudder. Now he has sent the news of King Zhao's intention to attack Zhuangguan, which must be for the sake of opportunism in the future. Niu Ben said, ignoring how Jiayiren is, if it is true, we must take precautions early. Now that King Liang and King Yan are dead, he may not be able to sit still. At this time, he will inevitably collude with the barbarians and jump over the wall. Yes, General. The general said in unison. After a pause, Niu Ben continued, Beimu, you immediately send out hunting cavalry to find the location of King Zhao's troops, and the rest will stick to Zhuangguan. The generals were ordered to leave at this time. Niu Ben asked Lu Fei to count the number of soldiers in Zhuangguan and deploy the defenses in the city in order to take Zhuang Pass. This time, Lu Fei just brought 30,000 elites, plus Qi Guanggai and Beimu's cavalry, a total of 70,000, and the rest of the soldiers were in Jiangzhou City. Now that King Liang is dead, there is no point in attacking King Zhao City. King Zhao sent troops to Zhuangguan at this time. Undoubtedly, after careful consideration, King Liang and King Yan are dead, and the only people who can help him now are the barbarians. If Zhuangguan is lost, the barbarians can only attack Xiao Ming's army through his feudal kingdom Wanzhou. This is an important military town in Zhao State adjacent to Liang State. It is located 200 li northwest of Chang'an. From here, 180 li to the west is Qingzhou, and 150 li to the northeast is Zhuaiyongguan. Since King Qi's army invaded Liangdi, the place has become more lively than ever, and a large number of soldiers have entered the city from all over the Zhao state. His Royal Highness, now there are 120,000 soldiers and horses assembled in the city, including 20,000 musketeers, 30,000 to 50,000 cavalrymen, and 50,000 archers and swordsmen in the Yuanzhou camp. A group of generals from Zhao state gathered. Zhao Yuanliang sat on the main seat and listened to the generals' opinions on the war. Zhang Chengwen has sent someone to bring news. He said that the 100,000 army lent to him by the Golden Horde is still under his command. At that time, we can attack Zhuaiyongguan from the inside, and they can attack Zhuaiyongguan from the outside. Under the diplomatic attack, those who rely on Zhuaiyongguan alone must not be able to withstand it. Zhao Yuanliang said in a deep voice this time. King Qi's army fought all the way from Yunzhou city to Qingzhou, which made the officials and generals of Chang'an very terrified because this Jiangzhou city is less than 200 miles north of Chang'an city. It only takes a few days for King Qi's army to arrive at Chang'an city from Qingzhou city. In the face of King Qi's pressing step by step, King Zhao had no choice but to send troops from Bashu to Yuanzhou city, ready to attack Zhuaiyongguan and Qingzhou city to prevent King Qi's army from going south. I just didn't expect that. Zhang Chengwen suddenly sent a messenger to come, and the two headed off, ready to attack Zhuaiyongguan while winning Zhuaiyongguan. They also open up the passage to the south for the Golden Horde. His Royal Highness, there are only 30,000 soldiers of the King of Qi in Zhuaiyongguan, and the attack on Zhuaiyongguan with 200,000 will surely be a success. One descended and said. Zhao Yuanliang narrowed his eyes. He said, the soldiers are very fast. General Deng has led 50,000 horses to Zhuaiyongguan first, and you will immediately go to help, and General Zhao will immediately lead 20,000 black armored cavalry to Qingzhou city to stop Qingzhou city. The army supports Zhuaiyongguan. Yes, Your Highness. The generals received the order and immediately went back to prepare. On the same day, the two armies set off from Yuanzhou city and went to Qingzhou city and Zhuaiyongguan respectively. 3 days later, the army of King Zhao arrived at Zhuaiyongguan, and they saw the soldiers of King Qi that covered the city wall. General, they are here. Lu Fei put down the telescope in his hand. In the sky, some sword and shield warriors in black armor first appeared in everyone's field of vision. In addition to some archers among the soldiers were some horse-drawn artillery pieces. This is not the first time Lu Fei has seen such a scene. King Zhao's army is densely packed, like the ants crawling out of the hole when the nest is smashed. The swords stood up straight, shouting morale-boosting slogans, which came from afar like rolling thunder. Don't underestimate King Zhao's soldiers and horses. Among the many vassal kings, King Zhao has always been known for his ability to conquer and fight well, and this time the leader of the army is Deng Yuan, a general of the state of Zhao. Niu Ben's expression was solemn. In the past 3 days, they have been sending people to investigate, and they have basically figured out the details of this army that only departed from Wenzhou. Hearing the name of Deng Yuan, Luo Hong, Luo Xin and the others' faces were even more solemn than Xiaoming. This Deng Fei came from a general, and once led the Zhao army to defeat the invading barbarian army many times, with few defeats this time. The king of Zhao appointed Deng Yuan as the main general to lead more than 100,000 soldiers to attack, and they had to play the spirit of 12 points. After all, there are only more than 70,000 people in Zhuaiyongguan, and they also noticed the movement on the grassland. Zhang Chengwen did not go far, but kept waiting for the opportunity. This time they may face a war of numbers. Luo Xin, when the time comes, the artillery will hit this general hard. Niu Ben instructed Luo Xin. After several wars, Niu Ben became more and more fond of artillery, because artillery has a long range and great lethality. Can kill a lot of enemies. Yes, Luo Xin shouted. Although there were only 30,000 musketeers at Zhuaiyongguan this time, almost all the artillerymen of the western expedition were concentrated in Zhuaiyongguan. And more than 300 field guns were enough for the army of King Zhao, who attacked this time apart. The division of labor for each general was clear, and all that was left for everyone was to wait. And as King Zhao's army approached, the atmosphere of war became more and more intense. Dongdong, in front of Zhuaiyong Pass was an open area of Yimapingchuan. The roar of the marching steps of King Zhao's army continued to echo. 3 miles away from Zhuaiyong Pass, King Zhao's army suddenly stopped, and King Zhao's army began to set up camp around Zhuaiyongguan, which meant that they would spend some time with Zhuaiyongguan. Chapter 669, Dangerous City. P.S. These 2 chapters were supplemented in the 5th update yesterday, and will be updated normally tonight. General, barbarian cavalry and barbarian slave soldiers appeared on the grassland while Niu Ben and the other generals were observing King Zhao's army. A general suddenly came from the north city of Zhuangguan. This time King Zhao and Zhang Chengwen are really planning to attack Zhuangguan both inside and outside. Niu Ben frowned. He said to Lu Fei, "Let's go to Bichang Gate to see. This King Zhao's troops are just forwards now. For the time being, if you don't attack the city, you will definitely wait for the soldiers and provisions behind you to arrive." Lu Fei nodded. This time he was in charge of the north gate, leaving Yu Qingyan to stare at King Zhao's troops. Niu Ben and his party arrived at the northern city wall of Zhuangguan. At this time, the barbarian army of Wanggang on the grasslands was approaching the pass. The barbarian army stopped 500 meters outside the city. At this time, the slave soldiers held their shields in front of them. They accepted the lesson of fighting against the Qi King's army. Not long after the barbarian army stopped, a cavalry suddenly rushed forward and shouted to the defenders on the city wall, "Bold madmen, you dare to occupy Zhuangguan." Washu Yutaiji said that if you hand over Zhuangguan, you will be spared. If you don't follow your life, you will be slaughtered after the city is broken. Niu Ben looked stern. King Zhao and the barbarians attacked Zhuang Pass at the same time, which shows how important this Zhuang Pass is. Otherwise the barbarians have to detour 800 miles to get out. King Zhao's feudal state invaded the Great Yu Kingdom. In this way, the barbarian supply line will be longer and longer, and they will always face the danger of being hijacked. So for Niu Ben, this battle must be fought for both sides. There is so much nonsense in a war. Lu Fei was not in the mood to fight the barbarians. He patted an artilleryman on the shoulder and pointed at Zhang Chengwen, who was surrounded by the barbarian soldiers. "One shot, yes." The artilleryman nodded, and the soldier in charge of the artillery immediately began to reload. As far as Lu Fei is concerned, he is not worried about this war. As before, the hope for the victory of the barbarians this time is to take advantage of the barbarians' unfamiliarity with hot weapons. They would never have thought that the things erected on the city walls can now reach an effective range. 3 or 4 miles. Now firearms are more powerful than before. The cavalry clamored in front of the city gate for a while and then returned. Seeing that there was no response to the cavalry's words, Zhang Chengwen showed an impatient look. He said to the barbarian general beside him, "General Duolong, according to our agreement with King Zhao's army, today is the time to attack the city, understood?" Doran showed a wicked smile. He let a cavalryman sound the horn of the attack. At this time, the barbarian cavalry quickly flashed a path, and the barbarian slave soldiers carrying the ladder immediately rushed to the city wall. At the same time, Niu Ben saw the barbarian artillery hidden among the slave soldiers. When these slave soldiers attacked the city, these artillery took the opportunity to move forward. The barbarians suddenly launched an attack, which made Niu Ben and Lu Fei a little stunned. When they recovered, they immediately guarded against them. Let the artillery blast off the barbarians' artillery immediately. We must not let them blast the city wall. Niu Ben looked serious. If the city gate was broken, it would be a disaster for 100,000 people to invade the city. At this moment, Niu Ben suddenly felt an unprecedented pressure. Kill! The slave soldiers shouted and braved the artillery bombardment, and the densely packed slave soldiers rushed to Zhuangguan. Bang bang bang. Facing the barbarian slave soldiers rushing over like army ants, the musketeers began to spray flame tongues recklessly, and the barbarian slave soldiers rushing in the front row fell one by one like cutting rice. But even so, the slave soldiers behind have rushed to Zhuangguan desperately. At this moment, the barbarians once again showed their bravery and fearlessness for this battle. Niu Ben mobilized most of the soldiers to other city gates, because the northern city wall of Zhuangguan was the most dangerous and difficult to attack. On the other hand, the southern city wall of Zhuangguan is very weak. They were the Shanhaiguan from the inside, so they are very aware of this shortcoming. Therefore, under this arrangement, the number of soldiers in Bichang is more than 6,000. But these 6,000 people are all rifled barbarian slave soldiers charging from a long distance will shoot them. Doran apparently found this too. King Qi soldiers were able to kill their slave soldiers from a great distance, but even so, they still couldn't stop more than 70,000 slave soldiers from climbing the city wall. Soon, some slave soldiers who climbed up from the ladder had a head-to-head battle with the soldiers guarding the city. With a long sword in his hand, Lu Fei kept hacking and slashing the slave soldiers who rushed up, while the other soldiers built a protective circle for the artillerymen to prevent the gunners from being killed by the slave soldiers. Niu Ben saw all this in their eyes. At this time, everyone looked solemn. and war has never been an easy task. When the slave soldiers rushed to the city wall, Doran ordered the slave soldiers to push the artillery to the gate of Jiaongguan. Take a shot at the ready artillery. Niu Ben's tone contained a trace of anxiety. The artillerymen looked serious, but they did not panic. After more than a year of war, they were able to keep fighting. They aimed at the barbarian artillery and ignited it quickly. Likely to lose once the firearm loses its long-range advantage, the number of people will become the advantage of the barbarians, and even if they are 10, they will not be able to win. The artillery shells kept rushing towards the barbarian artillery, and some of the shells hit the barbarian artillery accurately, which caused the barbarian artillery to panic. There were more and more barbarian slave soldiers at the head of the city, and Niu Ben was also impatient. When he was commanding the artillery, Lu Fei was almost soaked in the blood of the slave soldiers, and threw another slave soldier off the city wall. He looked at the situation outside the city wall. At this time, the barbarian artillery became chaotic because of the bombardment, but the artillery focused on bombarding the barbarian artillery, but more slave soldiers boarded the city wall. More and more soldiers gave up shooting at this time and used bayonet to fight slave soldiers. General, now we need support here, otherwise we can't stand it. The situation became more and more serious. And Lu Fei realized that he had overestimated the combat power of firearms. Compared with the troops of King Yan and King Lang, the barbarians were obviously difficult to deal with. As soon as his voice fell, a faint drum sound came from the southern city, and Niu Ben's expression changed. He said, "Damn, King Zhao's army has attacked the city. This Deng Yuan really never fought according to the rules. Fortunately Ben must dispatch most of the troops to defend the south city, otherwise it will be over." Chapter 670, Lack of Ammunition. Deng Yuan looked at Jiaongguan in front of him with a complicated expression. Half a month ago, he was still leading the army in Bashu to fight against the king of Shu, but in a blink of an eye he arrived at Jiaongguan city. However, after understanding the current situation, he understood that King Zhao could not continue to attack the king of Shu now, because if he did not stop King Qi's army now, he was afraid that Zhao's state would be wiped out in a blink of an eye. Dong dong dong. The drums were beaten, and the soldiers who were ordered carried the ladder to Jiaongguan. It is a taboo for the military to rashly start a war before the follow-up troops, horses and baggage arrive. Deng Yuan knew this well, but he chose to attack the city after the sound of artillery in the north of Jiaongguan, because at this time it must be the barbarians who launched the attack. He had heard of the prestige of King Qi's army even when he was in Bashu. In his opinion, neither himself nor the soldiers and horses provided by the barbarians at this time could defeat Xiaoming alone. Only by attacking from the north and the south can there be a chance of winning, so he chose to attack the city, not to break the city, but to contain some of the troops of Jiaongguan, so that they could not respond to the barbarian attack in time. Of course, it would be better if he could break the city in one fell swoop. I didn't expect that one day the general would have to attack King Qi's troops together with the barbarians. It's ridiculous and pitiful. There was a trace of grief and anger in Deng Yuan's eyes. The person beside Deng Fei was his lieutenant Xiao Kun. Hearing that, Xiao Kun said, "The barbarians have the ambition of the wolf. This time helping the barbarians to capture Jiaongguan is not helping the Zhou dynasty, but the king's order is hard to violate. We can only respect the order of the king of Zhao." Deng Fei sighed. He had always supported King Zhao and was extremely loyal to King Zhao. This complaint was nothing but dissatisfaction with King Zhao's alliance with the barbarians. After all, he had fought against the barbarians several times, and his generals and soldiers suffered many casualties in the battles against the barbarians. Boom boom boom. As the war drums beat, a roar suddenly erupted from the city head of Jiaongguan, and the black shells in the fire and smoke rushed towards the soldiers who were rushing towards Jiaongguan. The cannonball rolled like lightning, and where the cannonball bounced, the soldiers of King Zhao screamed, and dozens of soldiers were killed or injured in a straight line. Seeing this scene, Deng Yuan's face turned ashen. But this round of shooting would kill and wound hundreds of soldiers. Boom boom boom. The artillery opened fire again, and the ground was rained again. At this time, Xiao Kun said, "General, King Qi's army has always been good at firearms. If this continues, soldiers will only die more." Deng Yuan looked indifferent. He said, "Which war does not need to be filled with human lives? The only way to deal with King Qi's army is this. This siege is not only to contain the troops in the city, but also to consume their gunpowder and shells. Wang's army has been attacking from Yunzhao to King Zhao. There will be insufficient ammunition supply and food and grass. In addition, a lot of ammunition has been consumed in King Zhao. At this time, there must be not much ammunition storage in Jiaongguan. When their artillery runs out of shells, the musket is out of gunpowder and bullets, and then it will be easy to take down Zhou Aingguan. The general is far-sighted, but the last general didn't think of this. Xiao Kun laughed. Deng Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly. The soldiers were rushing forward and rushing towards Zhou Aingguan. One wave was repelled, the second wave continued to rush forward, and then the third wave. In Bicheng, more and more barbarian slave soldiers climbed onto the city wall, and Niu Ben and Lu Fei became more and more anxious. It was only a matter of time before Bicheng was captured. Just when he was anxious, a large group of cavalry soldiers wearing silver breastplates and holding sabers rushed towards the city wall. Qi Guanggai appeared in the eyes of everyone at this time, and he said to Niu Ben, "General, the King's Hao cavalry is here to support. What are you cavalrymen doing to join in the fun? This is a battlefield." Niu Ben said with a frown. Qi Guanggai said dissatisfiedly, "General, our cavalry is also a soldier. When you get on a horse, you are a cavalry soldier. When you get off the horse, you will not lose to the musketeer. How long will it take you to train a cavalry? If you are finished, will the emperor spare us?" Lu Fei also said. Qi Guanggai said, "What time is it now? If Zhou Aingguan is lost, no one can escape the knife on the head. The last general is not a coward, and the soldiers of the last general are not cowards. If the emperor is to blame, the last commander will bear it alone. It's natural to take responsibility." Niu Ben glanced at Qi Guanggai happily. All the generals of the King's Hao army were bloody men. "Come on." Qi Guanggai was instantly overjoyed. He said to the soldiers under him, "Kill me. Let the musketeers see how powerful our King's Hao cavalry is." Kill. With Qi Guanggai's angry man, 20,000 King's Hao cuirassiers rushed to the city wall, and the situation on the city wall immediately began to reverse. The barbarian slave soldiers who climbed the city wall kept falling under the saber, facing more and more soldiers wearing silver breastplates. The barbarians temporarily stopped their attack after dropping 3,000 or 4,000 corpses in another round of attacks. At this time, the sun was already setting, and from morning to evening, both sides fought fiercely for almost a day. Wiping the blood on his face, Lu Fei said, "General, Zhao Jun in Nanchang has also stopped attacking." Hearing this, Niu Ben finally breathed a sigh of relief, and he said to Lu Fei, "Strengthen your guard to prevent the barbarians from playing tricks." "Yes, General." Lu Fei responded. After a pause, Niu Ben said again, "Let the soldiers and artillerymen count the ammunition." Immediately after explaining the matter, Niu ran to the Zhou Aingguan camp, and after a while, all the generals returned. Fortunately, the general came to bring ammunition supplies this time, and Buddha will just use up the ammunition he is carrying today. Luo Xin entered the tent and said. Ye Qingyan said, "It's just that if the consumption continues like this, the ammunition brought by the general won't last a few days." Niu Ben nodded. "Most of the ammunition produced by the military workshop has been brought over this time. Originally, this batch of ammunition was used to take down King Zhao in one fell swoop, but I never thought that something went wrong." "Does most ammo only have this amount?" Luo Xin was stunned. Niu Ben sighed. "You are not home and don't know that firewood, rice, oil, and salt are expensive. Now the supply of saltpeter, iron, and lead can't keep up, and the ammunition is being consumed too fast. Now you have to save a little bit." Lu Fei and other generals were only in charge of fighting, so he never thought about the shortage of ammunition. With a wry smile, Luo Hong said, "I said that the guns and artillery are the silver, and the money spent by the emperor to set up the firearms camp almost emptied the treasury. No matter how rich King Zhao is, the 2 years of war will be lost." Poor Niu Ben glanced at Luo Hong with admiration. Luo Hong used to be the head of the firearms battalion, so he naturally knew about spending money to buy ammunition. No wonder the emperor was so eager to end the war in the north. It turned out to be the reason. Lu Fei said, "If this fight goes on like this, the muskets in the hands of the soldiers will be burned by the city fire." Chapter 671 Reinforcement. A dog can't spit out ivory without a fire stick. Niu Ben glared at Lu Fei. Lu Fei was instantly shocked. Hell, he laughed twice and dared not say any more. Niu Ben glanced around at the generals and said, "Zhou Aingguan can't be thrown away, and the ammunition is not to be missed during the war." All the generals nodded when they heard the words, and Ye Qingyan said, "General, most of the soldiers in the western expedition stayed in King's Hao City. If they came to support, the crisis would be solved." "What you can think of." Deng Yuan must have thought that now King's Hao City will inevitably have King Zhao's troops to contain them. This time, only the troops of King Yong and King Weinan will be able to break the game. "King of Weinan?" The generals were surprised. They fought with King Yong's troops, but why did King Weinan attack Chang'an with them? Niu Ben explained, "After the King of Weinan killed King Yan this time, He ordered to attack King Zhao with the army of the Western expedition. When they were about to set off, they must also be rushing to King Zhao. The generals nodded, and Lu Fei said, Chen Xinren's troops are stationed in Yanzhou, but it takes 3 days to get here from Yanzhou. 7 days, this is the time to hold on this time. If you can hold on for these 7 days, Zhao will be destroyed. Niu Ben said with narrowed eyes. The expressions of the generals became resolute, and the unification of the north was at hand. As long as the army of King Zhao was defeated at Zhuangguan, it would be much easier to capture Chang'an the next day. The barbarians and Deng Yuan attacked the city simultaneously from the north and south as usual, as if they would not give up without breaking the Zhuang Pass. At this time, the troops of the King of Huainan had arrived in Zhejiang. His Royal Highness, we found a large number of cavalry cruising ahead. They seemed to be King Zhao's black armored cavalry. A cavalryman who came back from the patrol said, why did the black armored cavalry appear in King Zhao? King Huainan was surprised. On the way, they received news that the Western Expedition Army had captured Jiangju, so he went straight to Jiangju, preparing to merge with the Western Expedition Army to attack Chang'an. Kui Shang'an said, Father, the appearance of the black armored cavalry is definitely not a good thing. Now we should join forces with the Western Expedition Army in Jiangju City to defeat this cavalry. You're right, Jiangju City is besieged, we can't stand idly by, otherwise this will be a reason for someone to tell right and wrong in front of the emperor in the future. The King of Huainan nodded and said slowly, let the cavalry prepare and move forward immediately. Yes, Father. Kui Shang'an immediately led the army towards Jiangju City. The appearance of the army of the King of Huainan quickly alerted the black armored cavalry outside the city of King Zhao, and the cavalry generals headed immediately sent 20,000 cavalry to the army of the King of Huainan. The scouts of the Huainan army kept observing the movements of the black armored cavalry. When they saw 20,000 cavalry soldiers coming straight towards them, the scouts immediately told the news to the King of Huainan. Father, the Xuanji Iron Cavalry is the most elite cavalry of King Zhao. This time they sent 20,000 people to test our truth. The King of Huainan laughed because of the high spirits of the Yan army, then let them taste the power of artillery. Having said that, he immediately ordered the troops heading to Jiangju this time to form a formation. He knew very well that the infantry encountered the dilemma of the cavalry on the plain. The black armored cavalry quickly appeared in the side of King Huainan, and the black steel torrent gave people a huge pressure. After the black armored cavalry entered the range, the King of Huainan, who was marching with the artillery, shouted, open the artillery. The black armored cavalry also clearly discovered the formation on the side of King Huainan, and immediately divided it into 2 groups and prepared to outflank from the flank. King Huainan, who found this sign, immediately ordered the artillery to fire, and the shells flew into the distance. Boom! The black armored cavalry that was galloping immediately turned their heads, and the bullets fell with this oil, but this did not make the black armored cavalry feel any panic, and they still kept charging towards the position of King Huainan. Sure enough, it is the black armored iron cavalry who is not afraid of death. The team of the black armored iron cavalry in the cannon fire did not panic at all, and still carried out the order to outflank. Several shellings caused a lot of casualties to the black armored iron cavalry. Some of the black armored iron cavalry and the black armored iron cavalry had their legs broken by the explosion, and they were trampled to death by the follow-up black armored iron cavalry. The iron cavalry made the King of Huainan feel a little scared. A distance of several hundred meters only took a short time for the black armored cavalry, and in a blink of an eye, the black armored iron cavalry rushed to the front of the Huainan army. After entering the range, the sound of bows and arrows rang intensively, and the arrows in the sky shot towards the black armored iron cavalry, rushing over like dark clouds. The cavalry that rushed over kept falling down, but the black armored cavalry still did not stop. At this time, Kui Shang'an immediately formed a spear formation in front of the lancer to prevent the black armored cavalry from directly attacking the infantry. At the moment when the spearmen raised their spears, the black armored cavalry and the army of King Huainan officially contacted. The spear formation rushed into the array. The 2 sides immediately fell into a scuffle. With the flexibility of the horses, the black armored iron cavalry rushed to the left and right on the ground, and soon tore a gap. When the King of Huainan saw it, his expression was solemn. Beat them immediately, plug the gap, and I can't let the black armored cavalry break through the formation. King Huainan shouted. Kui Shang'an nodded, and he personally went into battle, leading the only 8,000 cavalry to charge towards the black armored cavalry. Some of the black armored cavalry saw that Kui Shang'an was leading the cavalry, not only did not retreat, but returned and separated a part of the cavalry and rushed directly to the cavalry of the Huainan army. The 2 sides suddenly bumped into people, horses bumped into horses, and the sound of fighting resounded through the battlefield. At this moment, There was a burst of gunshots coming from the direction of Zhejiangji Castle. The faint shouts of killing also sounded from the city. And the gunshots were getting closer and closer to the army of the King of Huainan. It turned out that the defenders of Qingzhou City found that King Huainan's army had arrived outside the city. So they immediately poured out of the city, formed a chariot formation and directly attacked the King of Huainan, trying to join the army of King Huainan. Hearing this voice, King Huainan was in high spirits, and he shouted, "Soldiers, the soldiers of the Western Expedition Army are in front, and I will kill these King Zhao's minions together." At this time, the blood of King Huainan was surging. Although the artillery and bow and arrow caused some casualties to the black armored cavalry, the impact of the black armored iron cavalry caused him to lose more soldiers. These cavalry came and went like the wind, and his soldiers could not run on two legs at all. Even if the number of his soldiers exceeded the black armored cavalry by a lot, they still could not pose a threat to them. Perhaps only the musket pair could deal with these tiger-like soldiers. Chapter 672 Merging in one place. Clouds covered the sky. The sound of fighting on the battlefield resounded from time to time like rolling thunder. The black armored cavalry galloped across the battlefield with the flexibility of their war horses. From time to time, they launched attacks on the army of the King of Huainan, but at this time they never reluctant to fight, and often killed some soldiers and quickly evacuated. Although the soldiers of the King of Huainan fought bravely to kill the enemy, they were often unable to achieve significant results in the face of the cavalry that came and went like the wind. After the cavalry led by Kui Shengan and the black armored cavalry collided, they began to chase and kill on the battlefield, but the cavalry of the Huainan army was obviously at a disadvantage facing the experienced black armored cavalry. The Huainan army cavalry, who had never fought the enemy on the battlefield, seemed very clumsy and killed and injured thousands of people in a short period of time. While this was seen by the King of Huainan, although he was anxious, he still maintained a calm expression in order to stabilize the military spirit. Bang bang bang, the soldiers of the Western Expedition Army outside Zhejiangji City fought against the black armored cavalry by means of chariot formation. This time, the soldiers in Zhejiangji City were led by the commander of the Qingzhou Military Academy, Di Young. When the black armored cavalry appeared on the periphery of Zhejiangji City and did not attack, he realized that Zhou Aingguan might be in danger. It's just that there are a large number of black armored cavalry, and the soldiers and horses in Zhejiangji City are all infantry, and he is helpless against these cavalry. Yesterday he sent a chariot formation to protect the musketeers from fighting against the black armored cavalry, but these black armored cavalry never fought against him. But once the chariot formation was too far away from the city, these cavalry tried to divide the musketeers to encircle and destroy them. There were more musketeers in Zhejiangji City than Lu Fei took away, but the number was only 60,000, and these 60,000 people had to leave 20,000 to defend the city. After all, the city of Zhejiangji was breached, and Zhouang Pass was completely turned into a lonely city, and these 40,000 people will face 50,000 black armored cavalry. Even if they force a breakthrough, they will probably suffer heavy losses. So Di Ying has been thinking about how to get rid of the black armored cavalry for the past 2 days. Therefore, when the troops of the King of Huainan arrived today, Di Ying was overjoyed. He immediately led the musketeers in the city out of the city to join forces with the Huainan army. As soon as the chariot appeared, the black armored cavalry was a little panicked. Under the protection of the chariot, the musketeers relied on the protection of the chariot to move while shooting at the black armored cavalry. The black armored cavalry saw this kind of car formation that gave them a headache yesterday. At this time, the Huainan army was added, and they suddenly panicked. Keeping a distance from the chariot formation, the black armored cavalry felt powerless for the first time. This chariot formation is like a hedgehog. If it is too close, it will only be killed. The only way to break through this chariot formation is to break through the infantry car array. Bang bang bang, the chariots kept moving, and the black armored iron cavalry kept falling down on the moving route of the chariots. The soldiers of the Huainan army immediately got a boost in morale. King Huainan saw hope at this time. As long as their soldiers entered the chariot formation, these cavalrymen would have nothing to do with them. Kill! King Huainan shouted loudly, kill! The battle formation formed by the Huainan army reintegrated towards the vehicle formation. The Zhuangji Iron Cavalry tried to prevent the Huainan army and the King Qi army from uniting, but if they wanted to stop them, they had to fight head-on with the Huainan army. But at this time, the Huainan army had formed a dense formation on a hill. Wang Zhuan, commander of the black armored cavalry, looked at the battlefield in front of him, and the anxiety of the battlefield at this moment made his brows furrow. General, King Zhao's momentum has gone, and this time King Huainan is also leading troops here. With King Yuang's army, King Zhao can't be resisted. Standing beside Wang Chuan was Deputy General Wei Shaoji. Wang Chuan frowned immediately when he heard the words, and he said, "What is the meaning of Wei Xiaoyi's words? Isn't this increasing other people's ambition and destroying his own prestige? The general's words are bad. As the saying goes, the people who know the current affairs are Zhenji, Lian Wang, Yan Wang are dead, and the barbarians are fighting in Korea and Japan and can't send troops to help. The king of Zhao can't escape this disaster this time, and even if how can the barbarians send troops to easily defeat King Yuan, king of Huainan and Xiaoming's army?" Wang Chuan snorted softly. "So what? Even so, we can only fight to the death." Wei Shaoji sighed, and he looked at the battlefield again. At this time, the musket team and the Huainan king's army were getting closer and closer, while the black armored cavalry became weaker and weaker and could only watch the chariot formation and the Huainan army converge. However, when the chariot formation and the Huainan army gathered together, the soldiers of the Huainan army immediately entered the chariot formation and formed a more powerful chariot formation together with the army of King Qi. Di Ying saw the king of Huainan at this time, and he said, "Your Highness, the Huainan army must follow the car formation." The king of Huainan breathed a sigh of relief, and he said to Di Ying, "I will give you full control of the Huainan army for the time being." Di Ying's head is a bit big, but in this short period of time, the Huainan army has lost more than 10,000. The battle with the cavalry in the flat area is estimated to have scared the Huainan king enough, so the last will be arrogance. Di Ying said that he immediately dispersed the Huainan army into various vehicle formations, and placed the Huainan army's food, grass and baggage in the middle of the vehicle formations. At the same time, he asked the spearmen to protect both sides of the car formation, showing a rectangular formation and heading towards Zhuangguan. In the face of the constantly moving vehicle formation, the black armored cavalry continued to attack, but the increasingly tight protection of the vehicle formation made them unable to do anything. Wang Chuan and Wei Shaoji were anxious when they saw all this. He said to Wei Shaoji, "You immediately lead 20,000 cavalry to Zhuangguan, and I will lead the black armored cavalry to follow them. If there is a chance, I will delay their speed to Zhuangguan." "Yes, General," Wei Shaoji responded, and immediately ordered the troops to go to Zhuangguan. Now they seem to be unable to stop this group of soldiers from reinforcing Zhuangguan, and they can only go to Zhuangguan to meet Singhis. Di Ying and King Huayan's expressions gradually calmed down. For the next 3 days, they stopped and walked. King Huainan also learned to be smart. They made the trucks that transport food and grass also like chariots to protect the army from being attacked by cavalry. The armies of both sides moved towards Zhuangguan at the same time. At the same time, Chen Xinren, who was renovating in Yanzhou, also got the news that Zhuangguan was besieged. Immediately, he ordered a small number of soldiers to defend the city, and most of the soldiers set off for Zhuangguan. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye. In the past 3 days, the barbarians and Deng Yuan attacked Zhuangguan again and again, but they were repeatedly repelled under the ferocious firepower of muskets and artillery. Both the barbarians and Deng Yuan were lost. Niu Ben was not feeling well either. During the 3 days of hard fighting, many soldiers were killed and wounded, and the ammunition was getting less and less every day. After repelling another round of siege soldiers that day, Niu Ben habitually picked up the binoculars and looked into the distance. At this time, the musketeers of the Western expedition under the protection of the car array appeared in his eyes. Niu Ben burst out laughing, and he said, "It's time for a fight, Deng Yuan. This will come to meet you. P.S. There are more below, coming soon." Chapter 673 Final Battle. General, Huainan Army and Yang Army will arrive at Zhuangguan soon in the Zhao Army camp. Wei Shaoji reported to Deng Yuan he arrived at Zhuangguan city 1 day earlier, waiting for Deng Yuan's dispatch. "How many troops are there in the Huainan Army and the Yang Army?" Deng Yuan asked. "The Huainan Army should still have 80,000 horses, and the Yang Army's troops are estimated to be 70,000. There are also 40,000 musketeers here." Deng Yuan's face seemed to be a little older. This time, the number of the 3 armies meeting reached more than 200,000, and the situation on the battlefield had been reversed. Moreover, these days, he has no confidence in winning. King Qi's army is very familiar with the use of firearms. He has lost 20,000 people in the siege these days, and this only caused a small number of casualties to Zhuangguan. "Withdraw." After pondering for a long time, Deng Yuan spit out a word: "Withdraw." The general in the camp turned pale and shocked. Deng Yuan nodded and said, "The army of the King of Qi is still difficult to deal with, and now with the army of King Huainan and King Yuan, we will lose this battle without a doubt." Because of this, it is better to withdraw to Yuanzhou and use Yuanzhou's army. We must guard against Niubin's attack. As soon as his voice fell, a sharp voice suddenly sounded, "Retreat." General Deng said lightly, "This time we can't take down the army of King Qi who defeated Zhou Angwen, and the next one is Chang'an. General Deng, how can you afford it? Is this guilty?" Wang Shilin. Deng Yuan was surprised to see the person coming. This was Wang Zai, the eunuch next to King Zhao. Wang Zai snorted lightly, and said to Deng Yuan, "This time, Your Highness is worried that General Deng will come by his own temper, and he has specially sent Zheji to supervise the army. It can be seen that His Highness is really far-sighted. If Zheji arrives later, the general must bring along the army has withdrawn to Wenzhou." Deng Yuan explained. Wang Shilin, the art of war says, "The art of war is to encircle it at 10, attack it at 5, fight it when it is more than 1, and divide it from the enemy, run away from it if it is small, and avoid it if it is not. Therefore, a small enemy is strong, and a big enemy is captured. At this time, our troops and horses are already less than the enemy, and we should avoid fighting against them at this time, but should rely on natural dangers to deal with them." Wang Zai became more and more dissatisfied when he heard the words, 5 points to attack it. Before that, why couldn't the generals take Zhou Angwen while there were too many people? But now when I see the number of enemy soldiers, I want to escape, and I still have the face and the miscellaneous family to say what tactics. The generals around Deng Yuan all had angry expressions on their faces when they heard the words. This Wang Zai, because he was a celebrity in front of King Zhao, always looked down on these generals who were fighting outside. Moreover, he often takes the credit for winning Chang'an on his own head. General Zhao Jun was very dissatisfied with this eunuch, but he did not dare to offend him. Although Deng Yuan was a seasoned veteran, he had to bow his head in front of Wang Zai. He said, "Wang Shilin, King Qi's firearms are indeed powerful. In the past few days, due to the heavy losses of the siege soldiers, the morale has dropped greatly, and the time and place are favorable. People are gone." Wang Zai didn't care about this. When King Zhao sent him here, he ordered him to stop King Qi's army from moving south to Chang'an. If he couldn't take this opportunity to destroy King Qi's army at Zhou Angwen, Chang'an would definitely become the target of attack. "Wang Shilin, if you don't leave, Your Highness's soldiers and horses will all be folded here." Deng Yuan said anxiously. This Wang Zai is proficient in conspiracy and tricks, but he doesn't know anything about marching and fighting. Wang Zai snorted coldly and said, "It's not up to you." Although Zhang Chengwen led the troops this time, it was Washu Guotaiji who asked Zhang Chengwen to attack Zhou Angwen with His Royal Highness. "If you withdraw at this time, you will where is His Highness, and how should I explain it to Washu Guotaiji?" Hearing the name Washu Gu, Deng Yuan's eyes narrowed, and he said, "Wang Shilin, barbarian wolves who eat people, and they will not end well in the future." Deng Yuan. Wang Zai screamed, "You are bold, you are slandering His Highness, and when you return to Chang'an, the miscellaneous family must make a statement to His Highness." Deng Yuan laughed desolately when he heard the words. He was already dissatisfied with King Zhao's appointment to the barbarians in the battle with the barbarians. All 3 of his sons died in battle. If the king of Zhao had not been kind to him, even if he died, he would not have come to help the barbarians attack the army of the king of Qi. Now Wang Zai was worried about offending Wu Shugu, and he suddenly became angry and said, "Wang Shilin wants to say something when he returns to Chang'an. He can naturally tell His Highness, but the last general does not want Zhao's soldiers to die in vain. Withdraw, you dare." Wang Ziqi's chest rose and fell sharply, and he took out a golden fish talisman at this time. This is the military talisman given to the Zhejiya by His Highness. If there is no Zhejiya, you can recuperate and mobilize 1 soldier and 1 soldier. Deng Yuan was shocked when he saw the golden fish talisman. Wang Zai sneered and said, "General Deng, if King Qi's army attacks Chang'an, you and the Zhejiya will not even think about living." Deng Yuan sighed and stomped his feet heavily. He walked out of the tent in anger when the two were quarreling. The army of the king of Huainan had already set up camp in place, and at the same time, Chen Xinren also led the army. He immediately led the army to join forces with the king of Huainan. General Niu said to wait for his order before attacking. Di Ying said, looking at the flag carrier at the head of the city wall. The semaphore hand had already passed the order to him just now. Chen Xinren, the king of Huainan, and Kui Shangan stood together, and the 3 nodded when they heard the words. In Zhou Angwen, Nobin was dispatching troops. At this time, he asked Qi Guanggai and Bei Mu to reorganize the cavalry, and the musketeers in the city were responsible for the defense of the northern city. Now the trend of offense and defense has changed. They no longer need to defend the city, They only need to attack with all their strength. After the cavalry was assembled, Niu Ben glanced at the sun, it was noon, and then climbed the city wall. At this time, King Zhao's camp still showed no signs of retreating. What the hell is Deng Yuan thinking? Does he really think he can defeat an army of 200,000 people? Niu Ben was very puzzled. However, he only thought about it for a moment. For him, he was eager to avenge Deng Yuan's onslaught a few days ago. After waiting for an hour, Niu Ben asked the flag language hand to issue a series of orders. At this time, Qi Guanggai and Bai Mu, who had gathered enough strength, led the cavalry out of Zhuangguan at the same time. At this time, Di Ying immediately led the chariots to the Zhao army camp with the cooperation of Huainan army and Yang army. The defending the city for the past few days has also made him very frustrated, and now he can't wait to shoot all the shells out. Qi Shengen and Chen Xinren mounted at the same time. Chen Xinren led 15,000 cavalry, and Qi Shengen led 5,000 cavalry to join Qi Guanggai. The army gathered, and they pressed down on the Zhao army camp like a dark cloud. Deng Yuan looked at the mighty coalition army with a hint of despair in his eyes. At this time, even if the military god possessed him, he could not save the fate of defeat. However, he had already thought of King Zhao's intentions. Just as he sent soldiers to die to consume artillery shells, they were only used to consume each other in this battle. PS, in the second update today, many readers responded that there were many typos. This time Snail checked carefully, and will check it carefully in the future. Sorry, there is another website on April 17th and 18th. Lots of outbreaks. Chapter 674 Defeat Zhao Jun. High winds swept up the dust on the battlefield, and the sky was rendered yellow. The coalition army composed of Huainan army, Yang army and Zhejiang army marched step by step towards Zhao army's camp. Deng Yuan concentrated 50,000 infantry and 50,000 cavalry on both flanks, a total of 100,000 troops in front of the camp. Suddenly, a rushing charge horn sounded. This voice came from Zhuangguan, which was the signal to launch an attack on the Zhao army. Qi Guanggai and Bai Mu each led 20,000 troops to protect the flanks. The army formation in the middle was composed of musketeers from the Western Expedition Army, while the Huainan Army and Yang Army were responsible for hand-to-hand combat. They had an advantage in numbers, and the morale of the Western Expedition Army was high. Whether it was the Western Expedition Army, the Huainan Army or the Yang Army, all the soldiers were full of the belief that they would win. Dong dong dong. The drums of the Zhao army were beating, and 100,000 soldiers of the Zhao army marched to the west in an orderly manner. Luo Xin had dispatched some artillerymen to set up artillery positions outside the city. When the two armies approached, these artillerymen continued to pour artillery shells into the Zhao army's army formation. What? There were screams in the Zhao army, and the artillery of the Western Expedition Army shot and wounded the soldiers at the same time. In the face of the artillery attack, Deng Yuan had no way to do anything. At this time, if he dispersed into all formations, he would inevitably be massacred by the dense formation of the opponent. It is a principle that every general understands, that a battle formation cannot be chaotic on the battlefield. It was just the beginning for Zhao Jun. When the distance between them was 400 meters, the artillery suddenly replaced the cannonballs with great projectiles. This kind of shell has the ability to kill the enemy on a large scale on the battlefield, but the range is only 400 or 500 meters. Fire! An artillery general shouted. Boom boom boom. With the sound of gunfire, the soldiers in the front row of the Zhao army, who were covered by the gunfire, fell down like they were reaping wheat. Finally, facing the sharp killing ability of firearms, Zhao Jun in front was in chaos. Deng Yuan gritted his teeth and looked at this together. He had already expected that this war would be hopeless. During the siege of the city, he gradually understood the power of firearms in the hands of the Western Expedition Army. Zhao Jun's confusion was seen by Niu Ben, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. At this time, he pulled out the matching sword from his waist and pointed it at Zhao Jun. Suddenly, the horns of the charge blared loudly, and the battle flags rattled in the strong wind. The two winged cavalry led by Qi Guanggai and Bai Mu took the lead. Push forward like a giant tree in the mountains. Kill! Kill! Every time they walked 5 steps away, the army shouted kill, with an aura like a rainbow. Calm and unhurried, the two sides were getting closer and closer. At this time, the two winged cavalry also roared and attacked, and the Zhao army's central army composed of arquebuses also moved forward steadily. Bang bang bang. Finally, the two armies met, and with the advantage of distance, the Western Expedition Army fired first. Zhao Jun's musketeers suffered heavy casualties before they had time to fire, and the formation suddenly became chaotic. Although some of the arquebusiers continued to advance, the entire formation could no longer pose a threat to the Western Expedition. Facing the fire of the West Expedition Army, The remaining musketeers began to shoot at the West Expedition Army. After reaching the shooting distance, sporadic gunshots rang out, and the Western Expedition Army just fell down. Dozens of soldiers at this time. The Western Expedition Army continued to move forward. At a distance of 50 meters, the Western Expedition Army fired another round, and suddenly the Zhao Army fell down a lot. This blow basically crippled Zhao Jun's musketeers, and the remaining musketeers dispersed immediately. The distance of 50 meters has reached the distance between the two sides to charge, and the West Expedition Army immediately took up the bayonet. At this time, Zhao Jun's sword and shield hand was already rushing towards them. The dull sound of rumbling resounded through the valley, like a raging wave hitting the table, and the collision of swords and swords made a fierce crashing sound. At the moment of contact, the bayonet and the spear collided, the saber and the machete flew, and the dense rain of arrows was overwhelming like locusts. The screams of rage and the screams before death filled the entire battlefield. King Zhao still has some ability to train troops. Niu Ben looked around the entire battlefield, and constantly commanded the Western Expedition Army in the melee through semaphores to change the direction of the attack and the formation of the formation. Although his mouth was a compliment to Zhao Jun, there was already a triumphant smile on his face. Under the bombardment of the artillery, the Zhao army had already lost a lot of troops and horses. In addition to the shooting of the musketeers, they had lost 1/10 of their men and horses before they had contact with the Zhao army. At this time, the Zhao army was unable to fight. The Zhuangji Iron Cavalry, known as the elite of the Zhao army, was also entangled by Qi Guanggai and Beimu at this time. The long-term war made the King Zhao cavalry all become veterans. Evenly divided, no one can take advantage of the other. Only in this way, Zhao Jun lost the cooperation of the black armored cavalry, and it collapsed faster and faster. The Chinese army was quickly unable to support the attack of the absolute superiority of the coalition forces, and the soldiers began to disperse and flee. Wang Shilin, this is what you want to see. Deng Yuan rode on the horse. The situation was over, and he was unable to return to the sky. Wang Zai's face was pale, and he was shocked and angry. Why are 100,000 people so unscathed? These are the elites of our Zhao army. The king of Zhao asked Deng Yuan not to withdraw. On the one hand, it was to win Zhuai Angwen, and on the other hand, it was his confidence in Zhao Jun. Wang Zai was a little dumbfounded at the scene of the defeat in front of him. The Zhao army is elite, and King Qi's army is not a vegetarian. I would have reminded Wang Shilin repeatedly, but Wang Shilin turned a deaf ear and insisted on fighting with them at Zhuaiang Pass. The responsibility for this defeat is the Wang Shilin of bullshit. It's all your Deng Yuan's poor command. Wang Zai was furious, but Deng Yuan ignored him, and instead ordered the horn to retreat. Wang Zai didn't dare to stop him at this time, and he got on the horse and fled in the direction of Yuan's house. Together with Deng Yuan hearing the sound of the horn, the black armored cavalry immediately retreated on their horses, but Qi Guanggai and Beimu held on to them and chased after them for 5 miles before returning to pursue the infantry in the Zhao army. They did not ride their horses back to Zhuaiangwen until the sun set. At this time, the king of Huainan, Chen Xinren, had already entered Zhuaiangwen first. After the victory, they saw troops and horses stationed outside the city, and the small Zhuaiangwen was enough to accommodate the Western Expedition Army. This great victory makes this king very happy. I am happy when I think of King Zhao's furious appearance, haha. King Huainan in Niu Ben's camp laughed out loud. Kui Shangan said, when King Zhao was in Chang'an, he said a lot of contempt for his father, and this time he has taken revenge. Chen Xinren echoed and laughed, and he said to Niu Ben, General Niu is here on orders this time. Do you know what the emperor's will is? Niu Ben put away his smile, picked up his sword, pointed at Chang'an and said, now we should pursue the victory, break through the Huliao Pass, and enter the city of Chang'an. This is the emperor's will for the last commander. Chapter 675 Xiaoming and number 039, S counterattack. Chang'an, the generals in the camp all showed complicated expressions. Chang'an was the capital of the Great Yu Kingdom. One day Chang'an was not defeated, and the Great Yu Kingdom was always in the shadow of King Zhao. King Zhao has been in Chang'an for more than 2 years, and now it's time for him to get out of Chang'an. King Huainan said. Niu Ben nodded, and he said, this time the Zhao army has been defeated, and we have no power to stop me from marching to Chang'an. After a few days off, we will drive King Zhao out of Chang'an and restore the capital. Yes, General. The generals said in unison. King Huainan showed a smile, and King Zhao also lost this time, which made him more convinced of his choice this time. King Yan, King Liang are dead. King Zhao is just a trapped beast in a cage, and he will eventually become the most beautiful vassal king in Yu Kingdom. Thinking of this, he couldn't help thinking of his own daughter, and he didn't know if she had to enter the palace now. King's How the debate against the abolition of scholars, peasants, industry and commerce, and the unification of the people of Dayu into the commoners continues, and it seems to be getting more and more intense due to the successive capture of Wei, Yan, and Liang. Most of the land in the north is now under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. As a result, scholars from these three places have poured into King's How. After all, King's How is now the capital of the Great Yu Kingdom, and it is also the political and commercial center. The prosperity of Chang'an will be destined to be transferred here. Yu Ming is still kneeling in the council hall. In the Xingqian study, Xiao Ming nibbled at the melon seeds and looked at the memorial. Since he ascended the throne, he felt that he was not as busy as before. Although the scope of the imperial court's jurisdiction has become larger and larger, the prefectures of various states and counties have also been established in the busyness of Fiji and Pangyukan. Now everyone in the court is performing their own duties, but it is also a prosperous image. The only shortcoming is probably the conflict between the old system, the old thinking, and the new system, the new thinking in contemporary times. The reforms of feudal dynasties often end in failure, for no other reason, all because the reforms violated the interests of the powerful. Even if a certain powerful person appeared in his life and pushed forward reforms strongly, the person would return to his previous appearance immediately after his death. Even the Qin dynasty did not complete the reform under humiliation in the face of the invasion of Western powers, and was eventually overthrown. Therefore, in Xiao Ming's view, there is no other reason for the obstruction of reform, which is to violate the interests of those in power. This time he abolished the scholars, peasants, industry and commerce, and it was the scholar official class that suffered the most damage, and the scholar official class included officials, wealthy families, and scholars among the common people. It was because of this that he encountered fierce opposition this time. Quite simply, now the courtroom is filled with representatives of the scholar bureaucratic class, and the agricultural, industrial and commercial class has no right to speak in the courtroom. Your Majesty, Yu Shangshu is still kneeling. It's been 7 days, and he doesn't go back to handle government affairs every day. Hey. Jin Dafu sighed. Xiao Ming looked indifferent. Then let me continue to kneel. Jin Dafu gave a wry smile. Your Majesty, it's okay for Yu Shangshu to kneel, but the government affairs in this office have not been dealt with, and there are piles of backlogs. Hearing the words, Xiao Ming frowned. Yu Ming would go to court now when it was time for him to go to court, and he would bring it back when he went to court. Xiao Ming would kneel if he didn't agree. However, Yu Ming couldn't see Xiao Ming on his knees. Naturally, he was too lazy to pay attention to it, but his behavior itself was a kind of strike behavior, and the government affairs in his hands could not be left unattended. You can't let Yu Ming continue to make trouble, otherwise what is the Majesty of Zhen? Xiao Ming stood up. His tone was firm. These old ministers of Chang'an are really hateful, and since this is the case, I will remove him. If the Great Yu Kingdom is compared to a company, to Xiao Ming, whether it is Pangyukan, Fiji or Yu Ming, he is just a wage earner. He is the chairman, while Pangyukan and Fiji belong to the board of directors, and Yu Ming belongs to the top management. One of the problems now is that he is very aware of the shortcomings of the current Dayugao company, and he wants to reform these shortcomings so that the company can compete with companies from Western powers. However, the management headed by Yu Ming is still fighting against him with a method of causing the company to lose money. In this way, he has no choice but to kill the chicken and warn the monkey and let him get out. 4-legged chickens are hard to find, but 2-legged officials can catch a lot of them. Jin Dafu was shocked. He knew that Xiao Ming was really angry this time, but Yu Ming really didn't have the eyesight to see it. He hit the knife edge himself. Proposed decree. Yu Ming, the minister of the household, doesn't think about government affairs and disturbs the government. His conduct is not worthy of the responsibility of the minister of household, and he will be fired from today. Xiao Ming said word by word. Jin Dafu immediately took the pen, ink, paper and inkstone and wrote down the decree according to Xiao Ming's words. After Xiao Ming reviewed it, he stamped the big seal on the imperial decree. Go to the Zhuan paper of the Hall of State Administration. I want to kill this crooked trend. Yes, Your Highness. Jin Dafu took the imperial decree and went to the Hall of State Council. When Jin Dafu left, Xiao Ming frowned. Now he doubts whether these Chang'an officials in Fiji really accepted the New Deal ideas in Bowen College, or they just learned the methods of government affairs, but they didn't keep pace with the times and thinking, and it was precisely the thinking that was the most difficult for him to control. If this is the case, He must increase the ideological education of Bowen College and cultivate a group of officials who are ideologically synchronized with him, otherwise such conservative officials will become an obstacle to his reform. Although he was able to kill all these officials, no one would work for him without the officials, so now he has to continue to live with them for him. This situation will obviously continue for some time. And he does not want to take too big steps. After all, reform is a double-edged sword. When he suppressed the literati class, the capital class would inevitably rise. And the experience of later generations told him that if the capital class really took power, it would not be a reform, but a revolution. To prevent this, he decided not to focus on either side while reforming. While he was thinking, an eunuch reported, "Your Majesty, the commander of the secret guard, Wang Zhuan, asks to see you. Let him in." Xiaoming said. The eunuch left, and Wang Zhuan walked in shortly after. Xiaoming said with a smile, "There must be no good news for you to come to see me, Your Majesty. The lower officials are really annoying crows now." Wang Zhuan said with a wry smile. Xiaoming shook his head, "But what I need is you, the crow. Talk about it." Wang Zhuan nodded, his expression solemn. "The barbarians and the Japanese state have been fighting in guerrilla for a few months, and the two sides have won and lost each other. Xiaoguan got the news that Bishan is going to cede the two counties in the south of Korea to the Japanese state in exchange for the Japanese state no longer continue north to focus on us." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.